Call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the City of Kalispell's council meeting for July 15, 2024. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Fisher?
Here.
Councillor Hunter?
Here.
Councillor Nunnally?
Here.
Councillor Carlson?
Here.
Councillor Gabrielle? Councillor Graham?
Here.
Councillor Dowd?
Here.
Councillor Dahlman?
Here.
Mayor Johnson?
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Dowd, can you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, look to the council for approval of the agenda. Mr. Dowd,
Your Honor, I move the agenda as published.
Second.
second. Thank you, Mr. Nunnally. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We have 5 items on the consent agenda this evening. The first item are the council minutes from the June 17, June 24, and July 1 meetings. Ordinance 1922, second reading, Greater Valley Healthcare zoning. The third item is ordinance 1923, the second reading for Gardener's Acre zoning. The fourth item is ordinance 1924, the second reading, Bloomstone Townhomes Planned Unit Development Amendment. Fifth item is ordinance 1925, second reading, solid waste code changes. Is there any public comment on any of the 5 items on the consent agenda? Look for a motion. Mr. Nunnally,
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
second. Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Can I have a roll call vote?
Councillor Fisher?
Aye.
Councillor Hunter?
Aye.
Councillor Nunnally?
Aye.
Councillor Carlson?
Aye.
Councillor Gabrielle?
Aye.
Councillor Graham?
Aye.
Councillor Dowd?
Aye.
Councillor Dahlman?
Aye.
Mayor Johnson?
Aye, motion carries. No committee report this evening. We do have one public hearing on Main Street Safety Action Plan. Council will accept comments on the draft Main Street Safety Action Plan. Before I open that, Mr. Russell, you had a couple points of clarification.
Yeah, I had a couple questions came in from council just as clarification and probably appropriate to identify those before opening up for the public hearing, as we may have some people that are interested in the specifics as well. One of the questions emerged about the separated bike lane on First Avenues and how that would impact trees in it. And one of the cross-cut sections shows the boulevard and it shows light poles. It just doesn't show any other amenities. You go in there right now, there's trees in that particular area. More likely will happen as well through any potential redevelopment. There's no intent to remove trees as part of that. And that includes the extension from 5th to 6th. In the document, the narrative talks about the shared bike lane or the separated bike lane up to 5th. And then and the crosscut has it going to 6th. So a little bit of confusion there that was identified. The idea is if you can continue to do the separated bike lane to 6th Avenue, then it would transition into the east-west corridor for the same type of transportation mode. But there's not an intent to actually remove trees from the existing boulevards within it. It just was a matter of how that crosscut appeared within it. Right below that crosscut section, there are potential renderings that have trees on both sides of the separated bike lane. Now that creates some problems, adding additional trees in right where the snow removal would be, but that goes to highlight that any design would be left to when it actually, how the functionality of it's going to work through there. But you do have those two kind of contradicting images within the plan itself. So reached out to the consultant, or at least planning or development services did, and identified, their intent was never to have anything to remove trees from the boulevard or the streetscape through there. So just thought I'd clarify that as the questions emerged from council member today with that before the public hearing. So with that,
Okay.
I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, Mr. Russell. We're going to open the public hearing and take comments on the Main Street Safety Action Plan at this time. Please step forward, state your name, and give your comments.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm William Gibson. My address is 528 Woodland Avenue. And I wanted to address what I think is an issue with this plan If you look at page 80 of the document, they have Woodland Avenue being extended up to Idaho. At this time, Woodland Avenue is already a busy thoroughfare. We deal constantly with speeders traveling upwards of 45 miles an hour when the police put the signs out to capture those speeds. I would welcome narrowing Woodland Avenue to attempt to slow some of the speeders down, but there's already a significant amount of traffic. The stated intention on page 80 of the report is that Woodland Avenue would be used to relieve pressure from Main Street. And I think that it's remiss if you allow a residential street to take over the traffic that is currently going through a commercial corridor and what is a highway. The traffic on Woodland Avenue as it stands today creates a serious safety issue. We also have plenty of traffic of the woodland creature variety. I would expect that you would have quite a number of deer hit if you were increasing traffic on Woodland Avenue. So I'm just really concerned with a plan that includes that extension to Idaho, which would make Woodland a pass-through around downtown from Evergreen down to south of the downtown area. The other thing that I think you've got with the report is opportunities that are missed. It does not seem to address the issues on 3rd and 4th. Those streets suffer from quite a bit of traffic. They used to be one-way, right, and then got converted back to two-way, but we now have parking on both sides of those streets. And so one vehicle only is all that can really fit down there unless you're in smart cars. So for most of the vehicles going through, somebody has to yield to who's coming through on the other side. I think that there's a couple of ways you can address that. One way, you could have parking on one side of the street, different ways to look at it, but I think that's an opportunity missed. Some of the other things in the report, I think, I question whether the cost of doing those is worth what the value the community will get out of it. Some of the bike lanes where they're located, I think are going to create some additional traffic problems in thoroughfares that are already fairly congested. So with that, I just want to ask the council to revisit those portions of the report. I think there's a lot of great work in there, some very good ideas, but we need to consider some of the traffic impacts on the residential area there in the historic neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Jaden Weppel. I'm a resident of West Kalispell. I'm here to speak in favor of the safety action plan. I think that one thing that can be somewhat difficult to miss in the safety action plan is that anywhere where they're planning to do work, whether that be on 4th and 3rd, or whether it be on I think we just identified, was it like Woodland? There is a number of traffic calming implements that are going into those. So I would like the council to consider that anywhere where this plan has identified the work that it would like to do, whether that would be extending or improving the infrastructure that exists, is doing so to increase the safety for those that are on those roads, both folks who are driving as well as the people who are trying to get around their neighborhoods. Specifically on Woodland, I think they have identified that their traffic mitigations are set out to reduce specifically. Are specifically identified to reduce turning angle and rear end crashes that occur along that corridor, which are highlighted as some of the most prevalent that are there and cause some significant injuries to those people who have been involved in accidents along Woodland Avenue and up to 7th. Additionally, I think when we think of increasing the amount of people that are moving through these corridors of the many that are identified in the plan, you'll see that there is some type of either pedestrian or bicycle infrastructure that goes along with that. And I think that if Kalispell is willing to lean into those sorts of plans, can significantly reduce the traffic volumes that are felt, at least by those people that live in and around those neighborhoods and are trying to transit from one part of town to another and have access to the facilities to do so safely and in a more coordinated manner. Yeah, lastly, I would also like to mention that I know when this came up before that a number of councilors said first things first, and that means Main Street. And we know that the amount of funding that if we were to succeed in applying for and receiving this grant would be around $25 million, which would essentially be entirely permitted to Main Street if that's the direction that council would like to move forward with. And so for those concerns that address the more outlying areas of Kalispell or the greater Kalispell area, if that is a concern, I think that perhaps council could focus its interests on downtown, where maybe there's a little bit more energy or interest in having that happen. After all, the work that we've done, that the city of Kalispell and Flag County has done on the bypass goes back something like till the 1940s. People have been talking about having a bypass so we could revitalize our downtown. I think that we are as much of the way there in the bypass that we need to be, that we can start having our Main Street back. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Jim Langford, and I surfaced the First Avenue East tree issue, and I would just like to say that I think the plan is great. It allows us to get in line for funding. We do have some things we need to work out. I appreciate all the hard work that the staff and the council have done, and let's move forward with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, council. My name is Patrick Rankin. I live at 444 Woodland Avenue. I appreciate the few minutes to share some concerns I have with the safety plan. First, it's very exciting to see that we're talking about investing $184 plus million plus the investment on Idaho in consideration. So that's very exciting. But like Mr. Gibson and the other comments, I'll focus primarily on Woodland since that impacts me the most. As Mr. Gibson has alluded to, the traffic today is bad on Woodland. We have significant issues trying to cross the street to get to the multi-use pavement area, and it's used every day by a lot of mothers and children, family members, bikers. Gets a lot of active use today, and just getting to the path today is difficult. So when you see things like the RRFBs, those flashing beacons, it's very exciting. We could use those today, but the concern is if we increase the frequency and the speed of traffic on Woodland, maybe not the speed necessarily. It'd be nice if we could adhere to the 25 mile per hour speed limit today. That would be great, but that clearly is a problem today. So increasing the traffic on Woodland only makes that worse. So from a walker or a biker, the concern is right now getting across the street will only get worse with increased traffic. If you're a motorist today, the same problem occurs trying to get onto Woodland. And certainly if you think about the subdivision down on Sylvan, trying to get up the hill out of Sylvan and on to Woodland is very difficult today, only going to get worse, and this doesn't seem to address that issue. And then we get to Conrad Road, one of the most difficult intersections in the city, was identified at that spot as a high serious traffic incident issue and a couple fatalities as well near, just off of that. So does not seem to address that, at least in this plan, although we've seen some public comment that there may be a roundabout at that at some point, but not in this plan did I at least find it. So it doesn't address one of the most difficult areas in the city already. So that, as a motorist, is concerned. And then when you look at the road surface as well, today we're not supposed to have trucks on Woodland, suggests that maybe the infrastructure is not for increased traffic. That may or may not be true. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, public engineer, but today there are no trucks allowed on Woodland. And that would suggest that the surface structure couldn't deal with the increased traffic. Much like Mr. Gibson said, the extension from Center out to Idaho creates concern. Today we don't have any intersections there. And so you basically go north on Woodland, you turn on to Center, you go to 4th Avenue, and you're at Idaho. You're at Smith's, and then you're at Idaho. Two-way traffic, single street. As soon as you introduce a three-way roundabout, you increase complexity. Walking surfaces, etc., paths, nice, but you increase complexity at a new intersection. And then because I use the bike path a lot, It's really nice to get to the Parkline bike path or multi-use surface. We're now going to create an intersection up at the extension. So between what is today the center 90-degree turn and Idaho, there's now going to be on the Parkline another intersection as you have to cross that road. So if you're on Parkline trying to go west, you just have traffic intersection after traffic intersection. And I really appreciate the community's awareness of those intersections, but spending a lot of time on the bike path, they're often not adhered to. And so we've really got to be careful with those things. They're better than trying to get across without them, but they're not a fail-safe. So much like the rest of the comments on 3rd and 4th Avenue, love the idea of increasing bike paths, just not sure where everybody's going to park on the east side, because we have significant parking issues now. We have roads that don't have stop signs, such as 5th Street and 2nd Avenue. There's not even a stop sign there. So we have issues there, but when we love the idea of bike path, but the roads are only so wide. And where are people going to park? I've got parking in my lot, but there's a lot of people in the community that parking's difficult today. And trying to get two-way traffic is already difficult enough as it is. So appreciate all the great work. Very excited about it, as we were talking earlier with one of the council members. Very excited about the idea. Hope as we look at Woodland in particular, we could find some opportunity to address that a little bit more. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Jamie Quinn, 729 6th Avenue West, Kalispell. And so as we continue to talk about what is safety on Main Street and other parts of our community, we are leaving out a lot of things. We're worried about trees, but we're not worried about people. We all know that if we were to expand things to the Parkline Trail, what's the next complaint going to be? We see too many homeless people. 8 years ago when that Parkline Trail was built, about $22 million went to CHS to build a new facility. If 1% of that was put towards our people infrastructure, we might not be in the place that we're in on the Parkline Trail and other places. But instead, we continue to subsidize for-profits. We continue to only give to where we deem appropriate. I am standing here in a nice dress. I'm a white lady. I get certain things that other people don't get. If I came here and I showed up like I was sleeping outside, I wouldn't get the same respect. People don't care about those individuals, and that is what we're ignoring when we are talking about safety and infrastructure planning. That is the job. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I just hiked 20 miles yesterday to Medicine. But you know what? I also care about the trees, but I do care about the people that we're displacing and what the conversations are that are happening on this council and what is the full plan of infrastructure, safety, and everything else. And you know what? I'm really tired of the fact that this city council has not stepped up to make those infrastructure things happen. Too often, we are busy with other nuanced things. We have people that are pushing agendas on this city council, and it's completely inappropriate. I am utterly upset, fed up, and disappointed in what this council is doing. It has been 5+ years that I have shown up about infrastructure issues, the criminalization of poverty, but yet here we still are. I would love to start a vigilante service that goes around and reports everybody that we have nuisance policies on in this community. Sleeping out in RVs. You know what? I don't see KPD going after a $500,000 RV sitting outside with lines tied into their house. I don't see that happening. I see them going after people that are sleeping in a beaten down truck. And yet a few years ago, you turned around and said that that was a safety issue, and that's why they couldn't turn around and sleep in their vehicles. You're not doing anything about it. There are so many vehicles that are parked on the streets that are not supposed to be, that is not enforced. Just like a few weeks ago, you turn around and posted no putting signs on electric poles throughout the community. What ordinance is that? It does absolutely nothing. You are useless, ineffective. This is pathetic. Thank you.
Any other public comments on the public hearing?
My name is Carlana Shepherd. It's 244 Woodland Avenue. And I just want to make a statement that I'm tired of being lied to by you people. I've been to 3 different meetings in the past 4 years in this building where I was told under no circumstances would Woodland ever be punched through. And what do I see hidden on page 80? You're punching it through. I am just, it makes me sick to know that you looked me in the eyes and lied to me 3 different occasions. And it's ridiculous. Are you going to lower my taxes now that my property value is going to go down? No, I don't see that happening. But when that becomes a truck route, which it will, nobody's going to want homes on Woodland Avenue. I'm tired of the lies. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Cassidy Kipp. I live on 3rd Avenue East. I'm here as a citizen. I've actually stepped down from my position being an advocate within our community at the end of this month. So I am here only as a citizen. I've owned my home on 3rd Avenue East since 2007. Actually, when I was 1 year old, I celebrated my very first birthday over on 4th Avenue East on the 700 block. My parents are still on the east side. My family recreates on the east side. We walk, we bike a lot, and I love it. I love the Parkline Trail. I love what our town has done, and I love what it has opened up for my family. But I have to tell you, recently I've become really kind of scared in my own neighborhood, and it's never been a feeling I've had before. Again, I lived right down by the Outlaw, the 1300 block of 3rd Avenue East, when it was embroiled in the most nefarious things possible, and I still felt safe. All of you know where I have dedicated my life in this community, and it's making sure that people have a place to put their heads at the end of the day. When in front of you, you had that CUP to go ahead and to close down the Outlaw Inn and to move forward and to allow for the development of those units. You said it was the saddest day on council. And we did it because they presented with the conditions that they needed to, that were outlined within the ordinances that we hold to be true. I was told my neighborhood would not be impacted negatively. People are homeless. Last year, I called the police 3 different times. I never did that when the warming center was on my block. There are 5 open spaces to get into the Outlaw Inn right now, 5. And they're not little doors. These are full doors that have been knocked out. So we've created additional homelessness following the ordinance. We've allowed for that to happen. Now my neighborhood has been infiltrated with that. We're going after a solution that we've already identified as at least something working towards homelessness. We're talking about a safety plan, but you know what? Again, we go back to the fact that our town right now is being impacted in really significant ways because my kids are still not going to want to walk and bike around if we have these issues. And if you're closing the doors down on resources that matter, that whole system is not going to be utilized the way that it's intended to be because we're displacing a problem. All we're doing is continuing to push things around. It's just, I really hope that that's taken into consideration in totality when we look at everything in front of you tonight, because the safety plan is brilliant in so many ways, and I love those corridors. I really, really, truly do, and I love this town. But man, if we're not going to be able to use it, it's really quite sad. So again, as a citizen, to citizens, as a homeowner, as somebody who's deeply rooted in the well-being of this community and all that live here.
Thank you.
Hello, Arthur Fredheim. I am on 249th Street East, and formerly I lived on 904 Woodland with my grandparents. They were longtime residents there. And, obviously the previous comments are pretty hard act to follow, but just to clarify about the the Woodland residents who've expressed concern. And I think taking, unnecessary traffic away from Main Street's definitely a good idea, if we can do it. But that right across from the 9th and Woodland intersection, and for a couple blocks, that's a pretty steep cliff. And absolutely, I know there are concerns and have been a lot of concerns about the soil integrity and erosion. And, if we go and work on that road, or driving big trucks over it, what impact that's going to have. I think it's only held up as is because there's so many trees on it. You can go on the other side on that path down below and look up, and it's really just straight down into the pond. And, you couldn't add a shoulder on it. You couldn't add a lot of visibility because the deer can go right up through the trees and jump out, especially if somebody's going at speed. So I just wanted, hope that kind of clarifies some of what we heard earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments on the Main Street Safety Action Plan? Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing. We're going to move on to public comments. And I do want to clarify, we do have two action items this evening, Resolution 6212, tax increment finance recommendations, and then the hearing on the conditional use permit of the Flathead Warming Center. Item number 2, hearing on the conditional use permit for the Flathead Warming Center, is for us to get the response from the Warming Center directly from them tonight. I want to take their comments at that point. So at this point in time, because it is public comment, I'm not going to take it on that item at that point. I'm going to wrap it up after we get those comments. I want to give those the opportunity tonight to give public comment on that item, but also understand we are meeting tomorrow night to look at potential action on this issue. And that night is when we typically take public comments on an item, is when we act on it. So I just wanted to make everyone aware. I don't want to blindside somebody by getting to the end, because I want to give the Warming Center the time that they need to respond, make their comments, and then have those. I want council to think about those. We want to have time to think about the responses that we get. So at this point, I'm going to open public comment. If you do want to make any public comment on the conditional use permit for Flathead Warming Center, I ask that you do that at this time or tomorrow night. But please keep your comments brief. We have a packed room that if everyone gives comments, we're going to be here for an awful long time tonight. So any public comments?
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name's Alan McGarvey. I have signed on to the letter that has responded to the city attorney's discussion of the concerns that the council has.
Mr. McGarvey, if you want to speak with the Warming Center, I'm more than happy to let you do that.
Public
then,
comment.
Now is fine.
Public comment.
I
I
just
want
wanted to make
to, I
sure.
want to speak to the council as a member of the public.
Okay.
I live at 445 4th Avenue East, the house I grew up in. And more to the point of my comments tonight, my office is just 2 blocks down here at 345 1st Avenue East. This is the hot spot in the data that the council looked at a couple of months ago for reports of disorderly conduct, trespass, and so forth. This is center place, right here where we're sitting, and right there where my office is. Twice as much reporting as the Warming Center, twice as much. How does that look? How does that affect me as a business owner? How does that affect me as being in this neighborhood? I come walking through that area, I see unsheltered people in cars, in doorways, in alleyways. Just last week, there was a person camped out in the back of my office. I've seen it all the time. This is the hot spot where that occurs. What are we going to do about unsheltered people? What are we going to do about the consequences that come and are associated with that. Let's not shut down the sheltering of that. That's only going to mean more unsheltered people are wandering the streets here in the neighborhood. I know nobody wants this in their backyard, but certainly as far as the impact on the neighborhood, this document demonstrates that the impact on the neighborhood is twice as bad right here where we are, right there where the Kalispell Police Department is, where my office is, where my kids play. Good policy says we need shelter. It prevents some of the problems that can occur, and I don't want people sleeping in my office, back in my office, because there is no shelter place down on Meridian. The second thing I want to talk about, that's just good policy. The second thing I want to talk about as a taxpayer is good faith. When this body made a decision based on the recommendations of the Planning Commission to grant a conditional use permit with specific listed conditions, it made a promise. It made a commitment. And it was for the public benefit, and it was for the benefit of the city of Kalispell. It was for the benefit of the city of Kalispell when it applied to get grants from the federal government. This is something this city is doing for the public good. This is what we're doing. It was a promise. I expect, as a taxpayer and citizen of this city, that the promises be honored. And the third thing I want to say as a taxpayer goes to good stewardship. There is no way that removing a conditional use permit when every single one of the conditional uses, the conditions has been met, is going to succeed. Of course, a facility that has invested $800,000 in reliance on that promise is going to have a remedy. It's going to cost the city a pile of money. It's going to cost the city a pile of litigation. And in all my research, I've never seen a place where every single one of the conditions fully satisfied, the conditions the city council chose to attach, every one of them satisfied that a permit was allowed to be revoked. Maybe the city attorney has a way to do that, but he knows something that nobody, the rest of us, know. And I've been in the business a long time. That brings us to the last part that corresponds to good faith, keeping the promises, and honoring and protecting the budget, good stewardship. And that is, if you do succeed in taking this granted legal right away, that's an inverse condemnation. You're going to have to pay for it. And it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. The city can't afford to do that because it's only kicking the ball down the road because the same problem's going to exist. There are unsheltered people in this city. There will be. It will be increasing. We need places where they can be sheltered. I don't want it in my backyard, and I don't want to pay for you guys revoking the decision that you made. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name's Mandy Girth. I live on Kalispell's east side. I am the homeless education liaison for Kalispell and Evergreen Public Schools and the director of the Kalispell Heart Program, and I am here in a completely personal capacity, not a professional capacity. I am here to beg you to please not revoke the permit for the warming center because it seems like literally the most basic thing you could do during a housing shortage and a housing crisis. Begging you. I'm here for the face of the homeless children and youth in our community who I know personally. I met 4 of them last fall in the parking lot of the warming center. Their caregivers felt it was more safe for them to stay in the van than in the center, but that's where I first met them. They lived in their car last year for 8 months before they got an apartment. We had 470 students in Kalispell Public Schools last school year facing housing insecurity and or homelessness. 470. These are working families because it's $900 a month right now to rent a concrete pad to put your camper on at Greenwood Village. So when single parents like me, I'm a single mom of 3 kids, can't make that rent for their piece of concrete, where do they go when the Samaritan House is full, which it has been all winter long? I am the person, who makes the hotel stays while people are waiting to get into Samaritan House. When there's no place for people to go, they are at the warming center. Please don't close the warming center. Children stay there with their parents. 18 to 25-year-olds, mostly who have aged out of foster care, and who can afford to pay $900 a month for the most inexpensive studio apartment at the Vacationer, the former hotel, with paper-thin walls and no kitchen. $900 a month. What 18-year-old who just left their foster home isn't going to the warming center? Please don't close this valuable resource for our most vulnerable.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, Council, Mayor and Council. My name is Lynn Stanley. I live at 838 2nd Avenue East. In Kalispell, I've lived there for 35 years. I'll keep this short, and I just raised for your reflection. The others have spoken to the facts, and I am moved by those, as I hope you are. But in our community, we lack mental health services. Access, there's a need for access and availability. The people who don't get those services, some of them end up on a path to homelessness. In our community, as been mentioned, rents have gone up astronomically. That's put other folks, including children and elderly people, on a path to homelessness. And there are other root causes, but I don't think I need to go into all of them. I believe that if your desired outcome is fewer homeless people on the streets, why create the barrier to the very outcome that you desire? I urge you to renew the warming center's permit, and I would sign on to everything previous speakers have said. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Jay. I live at 761 5th Avenue West North, just a stone's throw from the warming center. I can walk to it if I want to. First thing I want to say is we've been speaking of unhoused people as if they're a special class. They are my friends. I have a friend who came to the Flathead Valley as a young woman looking for a way to get out of her her family life that was less than ideal, and she couldn't afford it. She thought she would be able to. She kept scrounging and scraping and trying to get creative with where she stayed. Finally, she made compromises, and her landlord wanted certain things from her that she didn't want to give, that nobody should ever be asked to give. That was what she had to do to try to afford housing. And she wound up on the street because she wasn't willing to make that final compromise. Fortunately, as my sign says, I was able to buy a house not long after that happened to her, and I was able to give her a place. And so even though she did have to spend a few months in our shelters, She doesn't have to anymore. And she isn't just some random person with mental health issues or who did this to herself. She is my friend. She did not make that choice. And so I just want to make sure everyone knows it could happen to any of us. And so if we aren't willing to invest in this and to keep these promises that can help even ourselves if something bad happens to us, what are we doing? And finally, yes, I do want the warming center in my backyard. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mallory Phillips. I live in Whitefish. I'm speaking in the capacity as a board member of Shelter WF, a housing advocacy organization, as a professional working in the field of social work, and as a lifelong resident of the Flathead. I ask that the Kalispell City Council does not pull the CUP or change the CUP for the Flathead Warming Center. I have seen people benefit greatly from access to the warming center. And in fact, this last year, I housed 2 people who were experiencing homelessness. So I know how hard it is to navigate the systems that are at play. In addition to keeping the CUP in place, I ask that you leverage your political power to work with legislators at the state level to craft legislation that addresses the root causes of homelessness, such as high cost of living. We need to preserve and create both naturally affordable housing and capital A housing, affordable housing, AKA subsidized affordable housing. We also need to revamp Medicaid. As Medicaid is unwinding, we have seen the huge ramifications when people are unable to access healthcare, mental health, and addiction services. If we do not address the root causes, this issue will only get worse. It's the reality. We have seen it all over the country. We often try to put Band-Aid solutions, and we do not work towards solving the root issues. In addition to the legislative actions, the City of Kalispell should call on other municipalities in the Flathead Valley and the county to form a county-wide task force to end homelessness that prioritizes working together to address root causes of homelessness. No city will be able to solve this issue, and I want to give Kalispell props. You guys have been approving housing, and that is a really important element of this, but it's broader than this, and what happens in one city impacts the other. And so I think you guys are in a unique position to be the leader in the Flathead and frankly across Montana to show that you can address homelessness in not only a humane and compassionate way, but also address the root causes. And in turn, by addressing those root causes, you can help make the Flathead a more safe, happy, healthy, and livable community to call home. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jamie Gogan. I'm at 4500 Two Bear Trail in Whitefish. And I have a video that I'd like to share with our community. I helped produce this video because it shows people who your neighbors are. These are the people that are homeless, and these are the people that are using the warming center. I experienced something real jarring this weekend when I almost lost the life of a loved one. We're only here for a short period of time, and people need our help. I want you to think about your legacy. Like, who are you? And like, what do you really stand for? When you look at your neighbors and you see them struggling in ways that you recognize people you love could be struggling too. And then when you think about people you don't know, neighbors and others in other neighborhoods, and you think about the situations that they're in their family lives and the trauma that they may be enduring. If we consider how to take care of people who have been traumatized, whether they become homeless and then experience trauma, or they are experiencing a traumatic life as a young person, take into consideration how mental health services can help these people to become productive, Because a lot of these people end up becoming homeless when they experience a traumatic event that they cannot pay for, medical bills, all kinds of things. You guys can use your imaginations. Let's remember who these people are. They live with us, they were born here, they're trying to make a life, and they're trying to be productive. If we save the warming center, we're saving our own arm. This is a tool that we are using towards a solution. But what we need is either gap funding to help people find housing right away, cover those expenses, or shelter where we can put people. I highly recommend considering what the Outlaw Inn could be. It's a central place. It's got lots of kitchens. It's got a lot of room in those conference centers, and there's about 300 units with flushing toilets. Flushing toilets are dignity, because you don't want to know what it's like to not have a place to go to the bathroom. Think about that. We're all campers. We could all use the bathroom in the woods. We're far from any woods anybody would feel comfortable taking a break to use the bathroom in this community especially. So think about how we can do things. Look to Dallas and Houston and Minnesota, who have come up with real solutions. Yes, it does require money that is already on the table, money that is just ready for communities like us to be taking and putting to work. That work goes to nonprofits that act as wraparound services. This is mental health, healthcare, job services, financial services, all that stuff, and then get people into housing. That money exists, that gap funding exists. It may not last forever, but I tell you what, it will be a solution right now. And then we can figure out the sustainability as we go. I always like to say, you jump off the cliff with faith in your heart to do the right thing, and you build your wings on the way down. That is the act of faith I'm asking you guys to consider. Faith in your own community and faith in yourselves to do the right thing. Again, these are your neighbors. Let's take care of each other. Let's be better. Let's blaze a trail on how to do it right. We all saw what happened in the news. We're better than that. All of us are. We just have to do better. And love is a verb, so do love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tracy Williams. I was raised on 1105 3rd Avenue East, Kalispell, Montana. Went to kindergarten and all through grade school at Hedges. My kids I raised on the corner of Conrad and Zimmerman. This has been my home. I've had to go to North Dakota to try to, do the thing. These mountains have a really hard call. I spend $800 a month on a 1-bedroom in my friend's little trailer house. Perfectly happy there. Just worked 10 hours doing landscaping for Biggie's Landscaping. And got myself cleaned up and put on Winifred Storley's ring. That I was with her when she passed away. I don't know if any of you guys know her. She was big into NAMI and spent her whole life advocating for people, with mental illness. You guys can't just shut this place down. We need more places like that, not less. These people are somebody's children. They're their parents. They're me. I mean, when I had absolutely nothing. And the best thing that I did for myself was I was doing that feeding the flathead, and I got to go and feed people. And it gave me back so much more than I could ever possibly give them. And at the end of that, we had extra leftovers. And we took them there. There's people, you guys, that want to make the world a better place still. There's people that spent their whole lives that are not here anymore, that have the finances and stuff to be able to fight this kind of crap. All I have of Winnie is her ring.
but she was really big on that.
The fact that the people who take refuge at the warming center are by and large from here. They're not imported from somewhere else. They're your neighbors. You grew up with them, you went to school with them, and now they're on hard times. They still live next to you, whether they have the fortune to live in the warming center or under a bush. Sometimes it's my bush. I find people in my bushes. And while that's not okay, I am grateful that there is somewhere they can go when it gets particularly cold. And I do know that I have options other than calling the police to have these people looked after. And I'm sorry, I don't know what the service is, but there are people who go out with the police when it's a nonviolent encounter, that they can diffuse a situation and take people to better places and facilities. And it's an option that needs to be publicized a little bit more. That's what I do when it gets particularly bad around my house. I think the fact that the warming center and their CUP is here before the council is you've listened and are now to a different faction, neighbors who are upset about what's going on in their neighborhood. You're deflecting your own culpability in the homelessness crisis. And that came about with the shuttering of the Outlaw Inn and the Blue and White Motel. And there's another one, I can't remember the name of it, another one that's coming up in Evergreen. In allowing developers to come in and take over this stock to improve it and drastically increase rents to levels that people who were currently living in those facilities could never afford. You should have insisted that they find another option for those they were displacing, that should have been part of their privilege to develop that property. And maybe the law doesn't allow you to do that, but rather than putting all this on a warming shelter, maybe you should look at the law and change the law. There are those who are living on our streets who are not good citizens, and they need to be dealt with appropriately. They're not allowed at the warming center. They get kicked out. There is a behavior expectation at the warming center. So rather than, again, opting to shut the warming center, we need more in the way of addiction care, mental health services, prison capacity, community service sentences, social justice, just to name a few. But there are options, there are things we can do to work on this, to force those who are making it bad for everybody to behave right or pay the consequences. We are bidden to take care of each other, to clothe each other, to shelter and house those who cannot take care of themselves. For those of you thinking to take this shelter away, here's where I find the gratitude. I'm grateful I'm not you. Because before long, all too soon, you have to stand before God and explain such a decision and say, what? What exactly are you going to say? I took shelter away? Or I found a better way forward. I worked with those in the community who wanted to find the solutions and found a better way forward. I really hope you'll think very deeply about this when you're saying your prayers tonight. Thank you.
Hello again, Arthur Fredheim, 249th Street East. And as Mr. McGarvey had mentioned earlier about the hotspots, I believe was the term he used and been used in the previous, that area that I live on 9th Street, 2 blocks from the courthouse, have a neighbor that's a bail bondsman, great guy. I've visited the court and the jail, I've seen that, and that is a hotspot as well. It's not as big a hotspot as what we're in here, from what I understand. And, we've definitely seen a lot of people out here in support, and it's encouraging. I met Jaya at the rally for the homeless shelter. And I've seen in the parade, they had a very nice, very well organized float, a lot better than us with our little vanity floats. Got together, and there's definitely been a community reaction. And I'm heartened by that, and I've always stood with the Warming Center. Now, that does mean I still want to empathize with the people who have, objections, the people who are neighbors of the Warming Center, and put myself in my shoes and say, if I lived near the Warming Center, would I still feel like I do now? And, while it's impossible to answer a hypothetical, I think that yes, I would, because I live in an area where I'm potentially affected by the jail and the court and all the county services, doesn't mean I don't want those services to exist. I'm glad they exist. I'm glad that we do have, the jail is not obviously it's not an adequate solution for housing in long term, but I'm glad that we have courts, even if it might affect me as a resident slightly negatively. I'm willing to say, yes, in my backyard to that. I will say also, I think there's a larger theme here about housing, about long-term and short-term solutions. I mean, I think we would all like to see long-term solutions for housing, stuff that eliminates the need for one-time, overnight, short-term housing solutions, whether that's at the Warming Center, at Samaritan House, or elsewhere. And, I definitely do think that, we do need legislation at the state level. I just out full disclosure, I'm a candidate for House District 7 here in Central Kalispell. And if I'm elected, I would be happy to work with any and all of you on, long-term solutions. But the problem is that the legislature is not in session right now. The next legislative session doesn't start till January. And then laws generally do not go into effect until the next January after that. So if we close the Warming Center this year, it will be 2 years, 2 winters of people out on the streets before we can have a long-term solution from Helena. And that is why I think we need to not take away, to not pull off the Band-Aid until things are healed underneath. And that's exactly the same thing with the Outlaw. I live near the Outlaw. Multiple commenters have mentioned that. I have seen how they run electricity in that building just to try and deter vandals, and evidently that hasn't been sufficient. And, it's a deadweight loss. I think allowing that to close was absolutely a mistake, and it closed right before hotels went up to $400 a night. So I can't, if I have family visiting, I can't put them up in Kalispell. And so I think we need to say, and the same thing with the vacationer. I've worked in the public schools, again, I'm speaking in my public capacity, but I know what the homeless liaison's office and the Heart Locker deal with. And there are families in the vacationer, in the blue and white, that were kicked out, that had nowhere to go, and I don't know where they went. But if we do that again with the Warming Center, before we have something better in place, absolutely, I think it's, it's going to be a disaster. And, I'll just close with a quotation from our former president, George W. Bush. And he said, he said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you won't get fooled again. So I think we got fooled once as a community when when all those hotels closed. And I think this is a time that we won't get fooled again. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, my name is Andrea Bachman. I live at 1245 7th Avenue East. And when the Outlaw closed, I was teaching yoga to high school students, and one of my students lived in the Outlaw. And the way he would show up to class, he was one of the most dedicated students there. It was during his school day. Yet a lot of students still didn't choose to participate, but he always did because he said he needed to learn how to breathe, to help him stay calm when he didn't know what was going to happen next. I don't know where he lives now. He didn't know where he was going to live. My time with that class ended, and during that time, there are many, many families like that. I've interacted with, through the work that I've done, families that are living way outside of Kalispell, as far as Marion, traveling in, living in an RV without a plug-in. If these families had resources like the warming center or other shelters in this community, imagine what they could give back to our community if that's something you're concerned about. Imagine how they would show up, how many fewer resources they may need from our tax dollars if they just had a place to live. I have the benefit of being able to bike and walk into town. That's a huge privilege. The safety plan would allow me to bike even easier into town, for example, but it doesn't cover any resources for folks that can't even live anywhere near here because they can't afford it and there's no place to live. Please keep the warming shelter open, warming center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ron Gerson, 4th Avenue East, Kalispell. As disclosure, I'm the chair of the Flathead Democrats and a board member of Valley Neighbors. I've addressed you on both occasions, wearing both hats, and neither of them this evening. I really just want to very briefly bring to your attention that the problem of homelessness, as with migrants, is not intractable. It is difficult. But it is not a political problem. It is a humanitarian, social, cultural, and economic problem. And I just beg you not to allow political agendas to enter into your consideration and your deliberation, whether individually or as a group, because it doesn't bring solutions to the problem. This is not a political problem. It's a much bigger than any particular party or any particular ideology, okay, other than humanitarianism and neighborliness. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Mandel, and I live at 205 Meadow Vista Loop, and I'm kind of outside the warming center issue, but I wanted to raise a safety issue in our neighborhood. The Meadows is right across from Kids Sport. We have a huge volume of people coming in and out of Kids Sport. All of our community walks into Kids Sport. The kids play soccer over there, and it is scary right now on that road. We've asked, it's 25 miles an hour. We've asked just recently for a traffic calming study to be done there. Hopefully, right now they have, I talked to Gene and he put a flashing speed sign there, and everybody puts on their brakes coming down the hill. They get down to 25 miles an hour. They think there might be a camera in there, and then after they pass that little sign, they're back up to 40, 50 miles an hour on a 25. Kids are trying to cross that road. Bicycles are on there, Kids Sports in there, and it's really scary. We recently repaved that road. It looks great. We lived on, while they were repaving it and putting the city pipes in there. I think it was, I can't remember what it was, but anyway, they did a redo of the street. It's a beautiful street, but unfortunately now they go even faster. And during that 2 months of living on a gravel road, cars went back and forth across that gravel road, past each other. I mean, it was, last year we had a car run into our street light right there right by the development. He could have gone, past the railing that we have, the steel railing that we have there around the homes, and he could have gone into the front of somebody's home or hit somebody. It happened late at night. But we really want to request a traffic calming study to be done and hopefully get a speed hump. When I worked with Keith Hoskins at the city engineer, he really recommended that this speed hump, because I've driven him over on Denver Avenue, it slows them down. You can't go past 20 miles an hour. Putting another sign up there, a flashing sign, is not working because people are just blowing through it. Someone's going to get hurt. And I really like for you to help us out with that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Ellie McMahon. I live on East Street West here in Kalispell, and I just wanted to say, please keep the conditional use permit for the warming center. As someone who grew up here, was homeless here at different points as a child, I think these are vital in overall well-being for our community.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Renee Dimler. I live on Wyoming Street, around the corner from the warming center. And I've heard several people support the warming center but say they don't want it in their backyard. Well, it's in my backyard, and I don't want it there. We've ran a petition and submitted several hundred signatures since May, supporting the closing of the conditional use permit. And what I understand about this meeting and this hearing is that this is not an issue of homelessness. We're not going to revamp Medicaid here. We're not going to rewrite the Constitution. We're not going to legislate new laws. This is a city council meeting to discuss the conditional use permit and what violations of the conditional use permit have occurred. And the last letter that I sent to council talked about several things that are in the conditional use permit that they are in violation of. The conditional use permit application that Tanya Horn put together specifically states in paragraph 2E, we are not proposing to build. Now, nobody is talking about this, and I'm really frustrated about it. But there is a plan, and there is action, which you all know, to fundraise, to expand the footprint of this, and to build a larger facility. I don't believe that this neighborhood can support a larger homeless shelter for this type of facility. It does bring more homelessness into the neighborhood. Someone who's lived in this neighborhood on this street since 2011, we have seen it. We've been watching it out our window for the last 3 years. And, it's not about Bidenomics. It's not about, COVID. It isn't about the economy as much as it is about if you build an ice cream shop, people are going to come get ice cream. And if you build a homeless shelter, more people will come to get services. I don't want it in my backyard. I don't. Any more than anybody else does. So I am in support of rescinding the conditional use permit. And I really hope that you guys take into consideration all the points in my last letter that outline the violations and the actions that the council, the board members are taking to expand that, even though they stated in their permit application they were not going to grow that operation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment?
Hello. I spoke to the city council before and expressed my experience with not my own homelessness, but homelessness in my family. Having to take in our cousin, and I mentioned how I believed for many reasons that while we were the lucky few who can afford to take the individual responsibility, if you'd like to call it that, to take care of our family, most of us cannot, and it is better to do it as a community, to have a community-forward solution to solving these problems. But today I'd like to talk more about something else, which is the social sentiment that drives us to make these decisions. This sentiment has sort of been on the rise, that we're a community that wants to lean into myths about homelessness and what causes homelessness, to deny the difficult questions in favor of the easy scapegoats, the myth that they're not from here, that they don't belong here, and that we're enabling them. But I'd like to ask a few things about that, which is, who are they? Well, the statistics don't lie that they are people from here. The vast majority of them are our neighbors and our friends and our family, the people that we know, and the people who have fallen on hard times. And I fear that this social sentiment is what's driving us to make these important decisions like the one before us today to revoke the conditional use permit. And I hope that we can evaluate what sentiment is driving us. Is it the sentiment of anti-homelessness, or is it the sentiment of making progress on our problems, that we should bond together as a community to do better? And this fear I have is from some horrible events that have happened. If you recall from about last June and the summer of 2023, there was a man who unfortunately suffered the cruel fate of this sentiment. At the hand of, I believe, 3 teenagers, he was beaten to death. And it's not a coincidence that he was homeless. This is the sentiment that is driving us today to close shelters, to bring up these myths, to believe in these and to indulge in them, that we need to other people, that we need to deny the simple facts that there are people from here, that they are our neighbors, and that it is difficult to find solutions that will actually help them. Now, I think that this is complex, and I don't think that any one of us is coming at this from a place of trying to derail solutions. That we all have our perceptions on these issues, and we're all doing our best to resolve them. That's true. I don't deny it. But I really would appreciate, and I hope that we can move forward being conscious of this without just giving our vote on a whim that reduce to as if removing a conditional use permit is going to make there be less people here who are homeless and is going to drive them out, and that is somehow good, that it is somehow going to deal with our mental health crisis. It's somehow going to lower the cost of housing, that's somehow going to heal people's addictions and mend all of our struggles. That's simply not the case. But I'm glad that we're all here tonight, that our community can show up and support trying to work towards what is the right thing. And I also hope that in the future we continue to consider, because any decision you make is not a one-time deal. It's something that will be on our minds forever, something that will be revisited by ourselves, by our future community, our future citizens, our children. I hope I know a little about that as a young person, just trying to deal with the problems that humans have always dealt with, right? That people and communities have always dealt with, struggling to coexist and everything. But I think that we can coexist, and that there are better solutions out there than to revoke it. If you don't like what someone's doing, is it the best solution to fight them, or is it the better solution to join them? Better solution to offer your good ideas, to offer what you have to the table, and to build something better. Use it as a foundation without tearing it down, a foundation to build on. We should be getting mental health services, and we should bring them to people, right? I mean, I don't think anyone denies this. Most people here don't support something like closing the shelter and then not doing anything, I hope. I hope that that's not on the table, because that's the worst possible world that we could live in, right? So I think I've said my piece, and I hope that you all really consider what our community should look like tomorrow and 10 years from today, and I thank you for your time.
Sir, can we get your name?
Yes, my name is Colton Little. I live out in the county, 3195 Montana Highway 206. Thank you.
Thank you, Colton.
My name is Jill Davis. I live in the county off Whitefish Stage. And when I was in high school, my mom was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and some other things. And she left us. It got worse as she got older, and she left us for 3 years. During that time, my dad had to resign from being a pastor because he thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go through a divorce. I don't want to drag the church through that. Long story short, we were living in a shack. People would donate food anonymously, leave it on the porch so they wouldn't embarrass us. But if it weren't for people helping us out, I don't know what would have happened to us. If it weren't for my mom's childhood friend letting her live with her for 2 years, and if it weren't for my dad being such a principled man, he took her back, she would have been homeless probably. So this is, I know there's problems, legitimate problems that we need to find solutions to, but closing the warming center is not the answer. But anyway, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi again. I'm Lena. I live on Fifth Avenue over by Hedges. So the thing that a lot of people always say is, if you want to help the homeless, why don't you open your house? I do. Okay. There are 2 veterans in this community, one of them who grew up in Kalispell, who are currently not homeless because they live in my house. All right. That shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be my responsibility. I have 2 kids and my family to take care of. That's your guys' responsibility, and it's ours as a community. Yeah, we have angry neighbors, but I didn't vote for them. I hear the crazy shit they say. I didn't vote for them. I voted for you guys. I voted for the city council to be able to, yes, hear the angry neighbors, hear my anger, hear everyone's anger, and think bigger than that, and think bigger solutions, and think what's best for the community, not just the angry neighbors. Because at the end of the day, I would rather my neighbors be angry in their air-conditioned, heated houses than my other neighbors be dead on the street. And that's not a joke, dead on the street. Last point, helping our neighbors isn't inherently socialist and isn't inherently communist. But telling our children, that they don't deserve to live because of who they are is fascist, and y'all should know that. And please don't do that here. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Ian Fleming. I have the good fortune to have a roof over my head at 249 Reserve Place. I've come to speak in support of the warming center and against revoking its conditional use permit. I think that we need to be creative in our solutions and be forward thinking for the long term. There are a lot of problems with people not having a place to live all across our country, but there are a lot of great ideas that are coming out, and we're starting to see some of them come to fruition. We are blessed in this city to have an exceptional staff. That it seems that we have a mandate from the public, and I hope that you would provide that mandate to them to find some creative solutions, to work together to solve some of these problems that we have in our community. Ultimately, I just hope that we live in a community that when somebody has fallen down, that we reach a hand out to help them back up, that we don't pull the rug out from under them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Rob Schrock. I live on Ranch Lane, Kalispell. After everything has been said and done, there's one thing that will remain. as much as you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me.
They want to give comment? Okay.
Mr. Seaton, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Henry Seaton, and I serve as the lobbyist for the American Civil Liberties Union of Montana. On behalf of our affiliate and civil rights advocates across Montana, I urge you to allow the Flathead Warming Center to maintain its conditional use permit and continue providing necessary services to the unhoused community in Kalispell and Flathead County. The ACLU of Montana has a vested interest in protecting and advocating for the civil rights of the oppressed and marginalized throughout this state. As such, we steadfastly support the Flathead Warming Center continuing its services and find the notion of revoking this crucial service in violation of our values and the rights of thousands of Montanans. In the 2023-24 winter season, the Flathead Warming Center kept 8,313 people from being forced to sleep on the streets. In a state like Montana, that service is nothing short of life-saving, especially given the coldest temperature ever recorded in the contiguous United States was right here at 70 below zero. Not only do shelters and warming centers save life and limb quite literally, but they also provide critical resources such as pathways to stable housing, treatment for a wide variety of conditions, and daily necessities. This is important because it directly addresses some of the many root causes of homelessness. Exposure to extreme elements, lack of access to hygienic and medical products, the things that typically characterize homelessness, negatively impact someone's physical and mental health, and those negative health outcomes perpetuate homelessness like a cycle. Organizations like the Flathead Warming Center begin to disrupt that cycle and introduce solutions and resources rather than piling up problems. These shelters and warming centers also serve a wide variety of vulnerable populations. Veterans, survivors of domestic violence, children, elders, and people with disabilities, for example. Their ability to access resources like those at the warming center lead to the beginning of freedom and sparks of hope for many of these people. Revoking them of this can lead to unintended consequences too. For example, preventing a child from completing schoolwork and keeping veterans away from access to necessary health care. Within this debate, harmful and unfounded stereotypes about people and criminal behavior have surfaced. To be clear, shelters and warming centers in and of themselves do not cause an increase in unhoused population in a community. The major cause of homelessness is lack of affordable housing and low incomes that don't match the costs of housing. The solution to homelessness is housing, and revocation of resources only prevents this from happening. Rather than bringing Kalispell further away from a solution to homelessness, the ACLU of Montana urges this city to maintain this conditional use permit and allow crucial resources to be accessed through the Flathead Warming Center while innovative solutions to affordable housing continue to develop. And the ultimate hope that we can see homelessness end in our lifetimes with compassionate solutions. Thank you so much for your time.
More onliners. That's it. Any other public comment from the room? Okay, we're going to close public comment. We're going to move on to the first item of action this evening, which is reports or recommendations on Resolution 6212, tax increment finance recommendations. This resolution considers the use of funds from West Side Core Area and Downtown Tax Increment Finance Districts for public infrastructure projects. Mr. Russell, presentation.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, as part of the budget process, we presented an option to address some of the goals of the urban renewal area on the west side to allow us to continue up with the historic levels of pavement preservation while we looked at the future assessment within the street district. Council previously approved the recommendation from the Urban Renewal Agency to move forward with a consistent application for the next few years for pavement preservation. The action today is a follow-up on that to address specific projects related in the urban renewal funds within that. And I don't know, Jared, if you had anything further from the Urban Renewal Agency as
Not a lot to add. As the manager stated, all these projects were talked about during budget discussions, with the exception of their within the memo, you notice there's a paragraph in there regarding the 2 Mile Drive project. The URA during their meeting did also make a recommendation as part of that 2-mile drive project to include sidewalk up Hawthorne between 2 Mile and 3 Mile. And now I say that there's no cost estimate at this time for that project, so staff would recommend it is an eligible project and a good project. It's identified in the transportation plan as well. We do not have a cost estimate at this time. So if council chooses, we would look at when the 2 Mile drive project goes out to bid, we could put that in as an additive alternate, at which time we come forward to council, could see what it costs and how the funding comes together, and council could choose to fund that portion of sidewalk or not. So with that, there is a number of projects in here. They all were talked about with the exception of the one I just mentioned, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? None. Any public comment on Resolution 6212? See none, I'm going to look to council for a motion. Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we adopt resolution number 6212, a resolution authorizing the use of West Side core area and downtown tax increment financing for additional public sidewalk, street, water, and stormwater projects.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Any discussion on the motion? Have a roll call vote?
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
Counselor Hunter?
Aye.
Counselor Nunley?
Aye.
Counselor Carlson?
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle?
Aye.
Counselor Graham?
Aye.
Counselor Dowd?
Aye.
Counselor Dahlman?
Aye.
Mayor Johnson?
Aye. Motion carries. Now the item is hearing on conditional use permit of the Flathead Warming Center. This is our opportunity, the Warming Center's opportunity to respond to concerns. And this will be followed with a meeting tomorrow night for any potential actions. But at this point, I'd like to invite any representatives up from the Warming Center and kind of walk through the questions in the letter that was sent.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In my work, I've learned to take a deep breath every now and then, and if anyone would like to join me, I think we could all use it. So if you'd like to join me, it really does help, because there's not a single person in this room that doesn't care about Kalispell. So that's what I want to start off with first. And I will try not to be emotional. I'm very passionate about my job, but I will try not to be overly emotional because it's very important that we talk about these issues. And I'd like to say to the neighbors that are in opposition of the warming center that are here tonight, I know how you feel sitting here and hearing the other side speak a lot, and it takes a lot of courage to be here and to speak up when maybe the rest of the people in the room feel differently. So I want to acknowledge those neighbors and say thank you very much for being here and having that courage. So now I'm going to take my courage. The mission of the Flathead Warming Center is to save lives, link people to resources, and encourage dignity through low barrier access to a warm, safe place to those in need. It is an honor to provide such a service in our community. This is serious work, and we appreciate everyone's attention this evening. Tonight, we defend the very existence of the Flathead Warming Center. However, we're unsure how to proceed. A review of the Kalispell City Code shows that there's not an established process for the city to follow. The city code makes no provision for the revocation of a CUP after the permit has been granted. The code makes no mention for a CUP revocation hearing, and it certainly doesn't specify what format this hearing should adhere to. We are not told the evidentiary standards, what the burden of proof is, if witnesses may be called, or even if they may be cross-examined. We don't understand how this is a quasi-judicial process. We are truly in uncharted waters, so please bear with us as we proceed. Here is what we do know. The City of Kalispell has acknowledged that the Flathead Warming Center has met each condition of its CUP, and the city has granted the CUP as finding of fact that runs with the land. There are members of the City Council who believe that I, Tanya Horn, was not truthful in my application to the City of Kalispell for a conditional use permit. In a letter from the Kalispell City Attorney dated May 31st, 2024, the Flathead Warming Center was advised of 9 assertions against the veracity of my application. The City Council found enough merit in these assertions to gather us here tonight. The only basis for revocation that the city has provided to us is my signature clause in the application. I'm here to tell you tonight that everything in the Flathead Warming Center CUP application was absolutely true to the best of my knowledge at the time that I signed it. I read and understood the under penalty of perjury clause, and I signed the document. To the best of my knowledge, I am the only person in these proceedings being held to the standard of perjury. Does the City Council really believe that I committed perjury? But how do we defend 9 vaguely written assertions? 7 times in the 9 assertions we read, contrary to initial representations. Are we to scour every word of every document that we provided in the application process? Are we to read every word of every transcript of everything we said to the planning board and the council? Trust me, I have. I've had 6 weeks since May 31st to find each of the assertions, and I've looked and I have looked. Even now, we can only guess at what each of the initial representations reference. In some cases, I cannot find any corresponding representation. I do not know how to defend unknown and unquoted initial representations. On May 28, 2024, the Flathead Warming Center Board of Directors wrote a letter to Mayor Johnson, the City Council, and Doug Russell. The letter specifically requested that each alleged falsehood in the CUP application be identified explicitly. The city never provided the requested information. Furthermore, 8 times we read, "This assertion is supported by public comments to the council." What is the content of the comments? Who made them? When? What was the standard used by the council in their decision to accept and act on them? In the same letter dated May 28, 2024, the Flathead Warming Center Board of Directors requested that each complaint and the complaining neighbor be identified. The factual basis for the complaints should also be provided in detail. The city never provided that requested information either. We do not know what evidence we are to defend against. We do not know how to defend against unknown comments made by unknown persons with unknown veracity. But the FWC Board of Directors and I will do our best. So here we are tonight. The City Council will hear from the Flathead Warming Center so that tomorrow you may decide if the Flathead Warming Center must be shuttered. A decision that would force homeless individuals onto the street in the coldest nights of winter and separate them from potentially life-saving assistance. We would first like to begin by identifying the Flathead Warming Center has met every condition of its conditional use permit. Here is our conditional use permit. The Flathead Warming Center is not in violation of the conditions of its CUP, and the permit has been issued. We are grateful for the opportunity to defend our integrity in keeping the promises that we made in our conditional use permit application. We will be addressing the 9 assertions included in the city attorney's letter out of order because it creates a more logical flow. And we will be addressing claims 2 and 8 simultaneously as they both address the same issues of loitering. There are 2 parts to address for each assertion. The first part is each assertion begins with contrary to initial representations by the Flathead Warming Center. So we will address that part of the assertion first. Secondly, we will present our opinion on whether FWC is responsible for the remainder of the issue outlined. And we have a different board member or staff member that will be addressing each of the assertions. So I think I will first ask Luke Heffernan to come forward.
Good evening, Honorable Council. With the same sentiment, I just want to thank you all for being here and just acknowledge everybody's work for the community and that you guys care. I do think you guys are doing your very best, and I appreciate it. So, assertion 9. We're beginning by addressing assertion 9. Flathead Warming Center initially represented that it would be a good neighbor and not cause issues within the neighborhood. Nowhere in the initial representations did Flathead Warming Center limit the area which it considered the neighborhood. Recently, however, Flathead Warming Center has indicated it only perceived the neighborhood to encompass an area within 150 feet of Flathead Warming Center. This assertion is supported by public comments to the council. So, defining the distance of our responsibility around the Flathead Warming Center is imperative. The council must understand the only communication we received from the city and how we proceeded in good faith. We chose to begin with this assertion as we realized that many misunderstandings stem from the fact that there was no definition designated for neighborhood by either the city council or the Flathead Warming Center. Specifically, no definition for a neighborhood exists when it comes to the conditional use permit process. In fact, it was even pointed out and confirmed by the city that there is no definition of a neighborhood for conditional use permit applications. Got a clip here. There is no standard for a neighbor in our conditional use permit process. Doug Russell, City Manager, 5/28/24, Kalispell City Council Work Session. Flathead Warming Center didn't define, but neither did the city. We were only very recently informed that there is a definition for a neighborhood in the zoning code, but we did not know this definition prior to filling out our application. We are not zoning and land use professionals. We are a nonprofit trying to make a difference. In an attempt to be proactive, the Flathead Warming Center wanted to reach out ahead of time to those who would eventually be notified by the city of the proposed conditional use permit. We have a slide here. In order to do so, the Flathead Warming Center called P.J. Sorensen of Kalispell Planning Board, who informed that the city would be responsible for notifying businesses and residents that resided within 150 feet of the property. Tanya Horn and I followed this example set by the city and proceeded to measure to ensure all appropriate parties were included and notified. We provided a letter introducing ourselves and held an informational meeting for our neighbors within 150 feet. We knocked on doors and introduced who we are and the plans for the property. We also took the extra step to research online tax records of property owners within 150 feet and mailed our information to the owners of each property. Everyone was invited to ask questions, attend an informational meeting, and to engage in the entire process. This was our first step in our intention to be a good neighbor. 150 feet is the only information the Flathead Warming Center was provided with in regard to who would be included in the neighborhood surrounding area. During our initial CUP application, Kalispell City Staff Report Council provided this map. During our administrative CUP process, the second conditional use permit was approved and granted by the city. The following map was provided by Tanya by the city of Kalispell. Please note, the properties highlighted by the city which define 150 feet. The 150 feet did not limit the Flathead Warming Center and who it's responsive to. We respond to everyone who notifies us a concern. We are not dismissive when anyone communicates with us. It is important to note we do not have the ability to respond in action for a half-mile radius of the Flathead Warming Center. and we never agreed to be responsible for engaging in each neighbor within a half-mile radius of the center. Neighbors within 150 feet are neighbors who receive regular updates, which include our director's personal cell number. We enforce no loitering within 150 feet. We could not have, nor did we agree, to be responsible for a half-mile radius. This is an important note. Just 2 years ago, the city granted the Flathead Warming Center the administrative CUP. That's a CUP. Our second CUP to add an additional 10 beds. We again were first to notify properties within 150 feet to the city's notification. The city also used the 150-foot standard. In 2022, just 2 years ago, no concerns or complaints were brought forward to the city. Flathead Warming Center followed the lead of the city set during the CUP and continued to contact the same neighbors. Flathead Warming Center had no reason to believe that the geographic area that the city considered to be adequate for city communications would somehow be inadequate for the Flathead Warming Center engagement. Flathead Warming Center has been responsive and active in their outreach to neighbors at 150 feet. On the slideshow here, you'll see there's a series of letters that we have delivered to those within 150 feet since we opened. There's a few of them. Within that 150 feet, we cleaned up vomit on a neighbor's stoop that we later discovered was not even the fault of one of our guests, but that of the business guest. We have installed fencing on a neighbor's property as an added safeguard. We have repaired siding that was damaged and went over and above, like I told you guys in the last council meeting, fixed more siding than what was damaged. Our staff has constantly walked the property within 150 feet, picking up all trash, even if it is not caused by our guests. From the onset, Tanya distributed her personal cell phone number to the neighbors within 150 feet and some beyond. Until this recent review process began, at no point did the city list a half-mile radius as a measurement for doing otherwise. We believe this half-mile distance is not reasonable, and at no point has the Flathead Warming Center accepted that extended distance within our area of responsibility. The Warming Center has been and will continue to be responsive to anyone who contacts us with concerns, no matter where they reside. Like I said in the last council meeting, it's not about 150 feet. It is about being a good neighbor for us, too. Simply because Tanya's contact information has not been handed out beyond 150 feet does not mean she is uncontactable. Any individual can go online to the Warming Center's website and find Flathead Warming Center contact information to make a report or to ask questions. It's right online. We feel that it is unfair to hold the Flathead Warming Center accountable for service a neighborhood that was never defined, and then to punish the Flathead Warming Center for not servicing enough of the undefined population. Tanya did not know of any definition of neighborhood that consisted in a half-mile radius when she signed the CUP application. Neither did I. Furthermore, we are unaware of any other business owner or manager who is held accountable by any city to provide their personal cell phone number to any geographic area. Tanya, as a matter of good faith and goodwill, has provided her phone number just as she promised to do. So in summary, the Flathead Warming Center followed the city's lead in regards to outreach, notification, and engagement within 150 feet. The only communication the Flathead Warming Center was provided by the city is 150 feet. It is arbitrary and capricious to hold the Flathead Warming Center accountable to servicing a neighborhood that was never defined, and then to hold them accountable for not servicing enough of the undefined population. I want to thank you all.
My name's Steve Snipstead. Thank you, honorable council members, for hearing us, for the time you give. I'll be addressing assertions 3 and 6. being responsive and accountable to neighbors' concerns. And so I'm going to begin with assertion 3. Contrary to initial representations by the Flathead Warming Center has failed to be responsive or accountable to neighbors' concerns. This assertion is supported by public comments to the council. And we do dispute the accuracy of this assertion, and on the contrary, the Flathead Warming Center has a strong record of responding to neighbor concerns, and we want to give you 3 examples of that. Do you have that clip?
I have the clip, but the sound isn't coming through.
Okay, so it won't do any good. This has to do with the a neighbor at the boot shop who was spit on by someone who was who had been a guest at the Flathead Warming Center. That was immediately addressed. The Flathead Warming Center staff went directly to the neighbor, addressed the individual involved. The guest was told he was not able to stay at the shelter anymore due to his action. The staff followed up, both the resource manager.
Can we turn that up?
He showed up early and I told him he couldn't stay for the night. He went over to the neighbor's property, got into a
Restart it. It's coming through the HDMI though, it's not coming through my laptop.
The gentleman next door.
It's coming through the speaker.
The gentleman called me, the business owner called me, and I encouraged him to call the police.
If not, then we'll go around it. but-
Okay.
Him to press charges.
No, you're fine.
And I put that guest out for the
Sorry.
remainder of the season. He was not welcome to return this season.
All right.
Okay.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, I'll just.
It came to my attention later that the police
Can you
were
restart
called.
it?
Let me start it over. Yeah, sorry, Steve.
Warming Center has responded when a neighbor called you guys with a problem, and how have you guys been responsive to neighbors in the past?
So I was directly involved in one conflict with a guest who became upset because he showed up early and I told him he couldn't stay for the night. He went over to the neighbor's property, got into a conflict with him. He did spit on the gentleman next door. The gentleman called me, the business owner called me, and I encouraged him to call the police. I encouraged him to press charges, and I put that guest out for the remainder of the season. He was not welcome to return this season for his behavior. It came to my attention later that the police were called. The neighbor opted not to press charges. Certainly that was his decision. I would have, but he can make his own decisions. But as far as the Warming Center was concerned, that guest was not welcome back.
Okay, thank you. Our second example is on our relationship with the Flathead County Fairgrounds. Councilor Nunnally is the director of the fairgrounds, and Mr. Nunnally and Tanya were in frequent communication between November of 2019 and September 15th of 2023. Over 91 messages were exchanged between the two of them regarding damages to the fairground, loitering, and general collaboration on addressing the homelessness crisis they were mutually dealing with. On one occasion, Tanya invited Mr. Nunnally to the shelter with his maintenance personnel to identify a possible offender. When they arrived, they were unable to identify anyone specifically, but we were attentive to his concerns, but we didn't have a recourse because we couldn't identify the person involved. You can see on the slide presentation that there are some of the examples of the text back and forth. But it does show that the Flathead Warming Center is responsive to neighbors' concerns of all kinds. The last example is the salon neighbor and owner of the North Meridian Salon, also named Tanya. We began reaching out to her when we first opened. We're in regular communication with her, and we're always responsive when she reaches out. We're in regular communication. We appreciate her taking pictures of the issues that she sees because that gives us a chance to respond specifically. We really do want to respond, but we can't respond when we don't know what has happened. We're grateful for her, and she wrote this nice text and said there haven't been any problems this winter so far. We appreciate really working with you. And so not only has the Flathead Warming Center been responsive to neighbors, but we're responsible and proactive with our police department. In this email, Mrs. Horn reached out to law enforcement in an attempt to assist in the identification of individuals who've been causing significant problems in the community, even when individuals are not guests of the Flathead Warming Center. Some individuals are not able to be served by the Flathead Warming Center because they can't meet the standards, the basic standards of behavior that we require. So we identify these people, we alert law enforcement when they're known to be destructive, such as in the Woodland Park encampment, and responding to all these concerns doesn't equal the ability to intervene in all of the concerns. If an individual commits a violent crime, the appropriate action is to call law enforcement. We can't enforce that sort of thing. So if an individual is doing harm in the greater neighborhood, is identified as a shelter guest, we'll immediately address those neighbors' concerns and determine an appropriate response. This response often includes the most severe punishment we can enforce, which is loss of warming center services. But in order to be responsive, we must have something to respond to. When neighbors see something concerning, we encourage them to reach out to us. If it's a law enforcement concern for safety, we encourage them to call the law enforcement first and us second. But we always welcome the opportunity to assist any community member. We also hope that going forward, people in positions of authority would proactively communicate with us as well so that we can address the situations that come up. And so in our summary slide, we assert that this assertion to be false. Assertion 6 is similar, but it is also about being a good neighbor. And that assertion is that FWC has not been a good neighbor as its patrons have left garbage and needles, they've defecated and loitered on the property and in the neighborhood and failed to be protective of the neighborhood. Additionally, Flathead Warming Center has not been responsive and been dismissive of neighbor complaints. Some of those in the neighborhood stated that they did not know Mrs. Horn or have her contact information. This assertion is supported by public comments to the council and law enforcement data. And again, we dispute this assertion. We did promise to be a good neighbor, but it is not reasonable to hold us accountable or prevent or be able to respond to every trespass or littering violation within a half mile of the warming center. And we did hear public testimony about these concerns, but without specific details such as dates and places or circumstances of the event or the possible perpetrators, we don't know how or what to respond to. We can't defend ourselves against non-specific claims. We do have policies and practices to be a good neighbor, and we have a slide here that describes the things that we do, the steps that we take, that we educate all our guests and hold them responsible about how to be a good neighbor. That's our occupancy agreement. We provide 3 large trash bins on the property to prevent trash from discarded on nearby properties. We organize trash pickup efforts around the community. We helped law enforcement identify individuals when photos were provided. We enforce rules to guests that prohibit them from being on site early or late, and we disincentivize them from loitering, and we encourage them to take the bus when it's available. So Flathead Warming Center has shown it's responsive when it's able to do so, but we're not able to intervene in a serious medical condition or criminal behavior, and it's not reasonable to have such an expectation. The appropriate answer is to call law enforcement. But that does not mean that is dismissive behavior. We want to actively help in the most appropriate way. In the CUP application process, Tanya explains that we can't control everything in the neighborhood.
There are things that we can control and there are things that we cannot control. We cannot control everything that happens in a neighborhood, nor can anyone control what happens in a neighborhood. We can't control if neighbors will partner with us.
And so the Flathead Warming Center has not been provided the specific circumstances of the complaints in the manner that would allow us to respond constructively and work towards resolving these issues. And we were not provided the detailed specifics requested from the raw numerical data from the surveys. We have some interest. Since this presentation was developed, I understand that more information has come. That survey on called numbers was very interesting. I think it has a lot of good things that we could learn from, but we would like to know more, and we weren't given all the things we could to prepare our response to that. And while residents beyond 150-foot radius may not have received a letter with Tanya's personal phone number, we are readily available online. Our contact information is available. We have an open door policy. Anyone can come and visit us. It's a welcoming environment, and any complaints that come through our general number are forwarded to Tanya. So in short, not having her personal phone number is not an obstacle to voicing concerns. And in the many cases that were brought up during the council meetings previously, we weren't aware that these individuals were experiencing the difficulties and frustrations that were indicated, and we weren't alone in this. One of the comments that Councilwoman Gabriel, who represents Ward 1, adjacent to the Flathead Warming Center, states that she was caught off guard because no one had reached out to her regarding concerns until this process began, and we're going to show that clip because we don't want to misrepresent what was said.
forward with that process. And I appreciate Mr. Graham bringing it forward. I didn't get any calls, frankly, until this whole thing kind of blew up at the council level. So nobody called me to tell me what was happening in their yards and things like that. So I feel a bit caught there that I didn't get any of those.
Yeah, we likewise feel caught off guard by the public complaints. We were surprised when the issue was raised by council members. We're given the opportunity to respond to concerns before they became a major public concern. We want to be good. We want to be a good neighbor. We will work at being a good neighbor. And we weren't given that opportunity. And so the city's assertion, our summary slide, that we have not been a good neighbor and have failed to be protective of the neighborhood, we regard this as false. Thank you.
My name is Nick Emaseger. Excuse me, I've been waiting a long time. My throat's a little dry. My name is Nick Emaseger. I'm going to be addressing assertion number 1, essentially. And these are a little bit out of order. The reason for that is we wanted to hit the ones that I think maybe had a little spillover effect so that we wouldn't have to keep kind of hitting the same thing twice. But this is one of those issues that when Ms. Horn was up here, when Tanya was up here talking to you guys, she indicated that we looked hard for what some of these representations were. We couldn't find this one. And so I will go ahead and read what it is, that the Flathead Warming Center has increased the number of homeless individuals in the surrounding area. So that's the assertion number 1. If you look at the conditional use application, as close as we could find to any language to that effect was here. The Flathead Warming Center will not introduce homelessness into the neighborhood. So to be clear, Tanya never promised that homelessness wouldn't increase. What she said, as you can see here from the paperwork, that we wouldn't be introducing it to this particular neighborhood because it already existed. So we wouldn't be introducing it. That was a comment that was made. There, as noted in the application, again, much different than saying increase, right? This was acknowledged by several people that spoke at the public comment process prior to the conditional use permit being granted. And it was also acknowledged even by the council.
We're not in.
Some of the concerns that are there. Homeless are in the area already. This is evidenced all around there. I listened to some of the planning board stuff, getting ready, just trying to hear what goes on. It was even commented that tonight someone saw somebody walking down the road. It's there all night long. I can tell you it's there all night long at the fairgrounds too.
So by the council's own admission, there is no question that folks knew that homelessness existed in that particular area. Again, not just by comments, but by a member of the council. This increase versus introduce is an important distinction. It's not a distinction without a difference. And so I want to make sure that it is abundantly clear that not only did Tanya not say that homelessness wouldn't increase, Tanya nor anybody else could ever say something like that. First of all, you would have to know the future in order to be able to predict that. But secondly, it would be contrary to all the information we had, and probably the reason that the homeless center came into existence in the first place. And that is that homelessness was on the rise throughout this country, and especially in the state of Montana. And I think we've got a graphic for that. So if you look at this report, the annual homelessness assessment report shows that Montana saw a 551% increase in its unsheltered population, with the steepest rise in the country between 2007 and 2023. Again, the steepest in the country during that time period. And we all know, because of the economic factors here in Flathead County, that that was even more acute in this particular area. So a huge increase. Nobody in their right mind would ever come before council and say, there's not going to be any increase in homelessness. Now, what is true is that there is an increase in visibility of homelessness. And so we want to acknowledge that. And there's several different factors that lead to that. And we've got a few listed up here, some bullet points. The closing of low-cost rental options, the lack of housing and living affordability, the moving along of homeless individuals towards downtown area, the closure of mental health services and centers, the lack of alternative low-barrier services, and changes in involuntary commitment petitions 2014 versus 2024. And I want to just, I spoke, I think, at length about this particular issue, right? The involuntary commitments when I was before you guys on May 13th. And I'm not going to say all that stuff again, other than just to incorporate those comments by reference. It's already part of the record. But it is incredibly significant to note, right, that between 2014 and 2024, back in 2014, when we had more services, there were way, way more involuntary commitment petitions filed by the county attorney's office. And those petitions are filed when we have somebody in crisis in our community. And the whole idea is to get somebody in crisis to the state hospital where they can be stabilized, they can be back on their medication. And in an ideal world, you would send them back to the community where they would be hooked up with services. But as you guys all know, those services have dried up. The safety net services we have for behavioral health, especially seriously mentally ill people, is the jail. And that is inhumane. And I don't think history is going to be kind to us when people looking forward look back and see how we treated our mentally ill people. But it is incredibly visible when you see seriously mentally ill people decompensating on the street. It's very disturbing when you see that in the community. But please understand, this isn't the fault of the warming center. As I said before, the warming center is dealing with this too, probably more so than any other entity in this community, because they are sort of the last resort safety net service and the only one we have in this community. So I do want to make this comment too, because I think that much is sort of being relied upon by this language that appeared at the end of the application, this, to the best of my knowledge, language that's contained there. And I know Tanya has already addressed that. But based on this, to the best of my knowledge, language that's contained there, even if the city were allowed to conflate introduce with increase, even if they were allowed to do that, which they're not, but even if they were allowed to do that, the city cannot possibly contend that Ms. Horn had advanced knowledge that homelessness would increase in the community.
Backyard sentiment, no matter where this is proposed. And given this location, it does feel like it would be difficult to find something more appropriate.
So we've heard it several different times tonight, not in my backyard. And again, we all can appreciate that. This issue isn't going to go away. We do desperately need to work together to find a solution. In summary, the conditional use permit application said Flathead Warming Center would not introduce homelessness because the homeless were already in that area. We do not contend that there has been no increase, but we do feel strongly that the cause is not justifiably attributable to the Flathead Warming Center, nor have we been given the evidence that justifies this assertion.
Good evening, Mayor Johnson, City Council, City staff. I asked for Doug Russell to hire me back since I'm here so often anymore, that I'd get a paycheck for being here. Last time I was here as Chief of Police, I didn't have to put on glasses, but time has taken its toll. So my name is Roger Nassett. I live at P.O. Box 2357 in Kalispell, actually my mailing address. I have had the privilege of serving the city of Kalispell as a police officer for 25 years. 11 of those years were as Chief of Police, retiring in December of 2017. I could not imagine that I would be in front of council again in what feels to be an adversarial position. Adversarial is the last thing that the Flathead Warming Center or I envisioned. As it has been our goal to be an asset to the entire Flathead Valley community, not just the homeless community. I am briefly going to address assertion 4 from the May 31st, 2024 letter from the Kalispell City Attorney to Tanya Horn. Assertion 4, as you can see, states, contrary to initial representations by FWC, the presence of FWC has increased law enforcement calls in the area. This assertion is supported by the difference in the number of calls to law enforcement when FWC was open compared to when it was closed. I want to be very, very clear that it has never been the Flathead Warming Center's intentions to be deceptive during the conditional use permitting process or after. We do not find where the city has provided any evidence, nor do we believe that the Warming Center's executive director, Tanya Horn, made any untrue or incorrect initial representations in the application process. The city's data implies that the number of calls in a large radius around the warming center have increased since it opened in 2020. In response, I would suggest to you that correlation is not causation. And if you read on the slide, as Thomas Sowell said, it's one of the first things that we forget. It's one of the things that we learn, but it's one of the first things that we forget also. My point being that from the time the Flathead Warming Center opened its doors on Meridian, several factors have been in play and may have skewed that correlation. These factors include the closing of multiple low-income housing sites, an increase in mental health and addictions, diminishing care for mental health and addictions, substantial cost of living increases, and the everlasting effects of COVID. The city's own data demonstrates how the entire city has had an increase in calls for service, not just the area surrounding the Flathead Warming Center. Yes, the calls for service numbers are higher in the surrounding area, especially if you look at the percentages, which I will address shortly. However, the aforementioned unforeseen circumstances are contributors, and we do not know how many of these calls have an actual connection to the Flathead Warming Center. There is something I believe is being overlooked in all of this. What would the citywide calls for service numbers have been without the warming center? You would have approximately 330 different guests per season over roughly 205 dangerously cold nights on the streets trying to survive. I truly believe without the Flathead Warming Center, the calls for service numbers would have been much, much higher in the rest of the city, in the entire city. As mentioned before, a significant number within the homeless communities are struggling with severe mental health issues and addictions. If an individual is being violent or committing a crime, the appropriate action is to call law enforcement. I mention this to emphasize that the members of the City Council, prior to approving the conditional use permit, encouraged that law enforcement be contacted if there were problems within or around the warming center. And I believe we have a clip. We don't? So this was a clip of Councilor Nunley speaking about the importance of calling law enforcement if there were an issue, which we would all do. I mean, that's normal procedure, right? All involved in the conditional use permit reasonably understood, or should have, that there would be calls for service related to the Flathead Warming Center. If you add a retail store, a bar, a fairgrounds, or a beauty salon to an area, you are going to increase the calls for service. That's the way real life works. I do believe the potential impact of the Flathead Warming Center was appropriately discussed and understood in the CUP process. The calls for service data presented by the city in the surrounding area does not prove to what degree an increase in loitering, garbage, law enforcement calls, etc., can be directly attributed to the Flathead Warming Center. It just can't be done from the data that we have. If you evaluate the data presented by the city, the increase in calls for service turns out to be approximately an additional 0.6 calls per day, if my math is right. 6.6 calls per day in the surrounding areas over the approximate 205 nights the Flathead Warming Center is open. However, if you look at the overall percentages, which we were given first, the percentage increases as provided, it appears that the Flathead Warming Center is located in downtown Chicago. That's the discrepancy between the percentages and the numbers, and that's because the numbers of overall calls for service were low to begin with. So if you add just a few, it makes those percentages look very high. The heat map, which you can see in front of you, shows a dense call increase throughout the entire city and not just in the areas surrounding the warming center. This year, the City of Kalispell successfully campaigned for a much-needed $4.6 million public safety levy for additional public safety services. In doing so, the city cited Kalispell's population had outpaced its resources and a citywide increase in crimes. Citywide. It wasn't mentioned that it was the Flathead Warming Center area. It was citywide. During the CUP process, the city presented the belief that they had the availability and capacity to handle the needs that may arise from opening the Flathead Warming Center, which included law enforcement assistance. At the time, the Kalispell City Council was apprised of what a homeless shelter was and the population that it intended to serve. That was known during the process. Unfortunately, the city nor the Flathead Warming Center could have predicted the events that led to our current homeless crisis. In summary, I suggest the city's assertion that the Flathead Warming Center represented there would not be an increase in law enforcement is not accurate, and that no such representation was made. Additionally, I suggest the data provided by the city lacks sufficient detail to attribute calls for service in the surrounding area directly to the Flathead Warming Center. And I'd like to finish with two questions to council. If you revoke the CUP, what is your plan for the 330 people that relied on the shelter to stay safe, warm, and alive? Is there a plan? Secondly, hopefully the CUP is not or cannot legally be revoked. If it is not revoked, can we then work together to improve the homeless situation and improve on the concerns that have come forward through this process? Thank you for your time, and I pray that God will direct your deliberations.
Good evening, City Council. I'm John Roush. I'm the Resource Manager at the Flathead Warming Center, and I'm a licensed addictions counselor with 19 years experience. And I'm going to talk about assertion 218, which is in relation to loitering. First, I want to start out by talking about the individual who was mentioned earlier who had spit in the face of one of our neighbors. That individual, it was misrepresented in the clip that individual would be out for the season. Tanya and I had a discussion. We revamped our policies around harassing neighbors and protecting our neighbors, and that's very important to us. And that individual is out for life, can never return to the Flathead Warming Center. So I want to read assertion 2 to start with. It says, contrary to initial representation by FWC, the surrounding neighborhood has seen an increase in loitering in the area. And we were unable to find in any of the application materials at any time when Tanya promised the Flathead Warming Center would not increase loitering in the area. Furthermore, the city has not cited such a promise. The only evidence provided by the city in this matter is that the assertion is supported by public comments to the council. The council has not cited said public comments, nor who made them, or even the evidentiary standard the city applied in the decision to act upon them. Neither has the city cited substantial data to support the assertion that loitering has increased. Loitering and trespass are both crimes. We would expect that if there were more loitering, KPD would have issued more citations for loitering and trespass. A review of these citations would quickly show whether said loiterers were guests of FWC. We do not have any data, therefore, we cannot conclude that FWC has increased loitering in the area. And then assertion 8 reads, in part, FWC has minimized the seriousness of the loitering issues in the neighborhood. This assertion is supported by public comments to the city. In her application materials, Tanya absolutely voiced concerns about loitering in the area. However, minimizing concerns cannot be objectively measured like some of the other assertions we are responding to tonight. We can, however, objectively measure the Flathead Warming Center's policies and the actions they take to mitigate loitering. Every night, FWC guest agrees and signs a nightly occupancy agreement. The very first provision in the occupancy agreement reads, "I must be a good neighbor," and the occupancy agreement spells out our expectations and code of conduct, or I'll be asked to leave. That is the first statement because that is the most important statement to us. We take that very seriously. Now, do we have that slide? Okay. The occupancy agreement slide?
Is the occupancy agreement slide?
Okay. There's no loitering on this property or neighbor's property. I may not be on the property before 5:30 or after 10. I will not leave, stash belongings, or trash anywhere outside or in the neighborhood. I understand that anyone who has poor aggressive behavior on neighbor properties, businesses, will lose their bed, potentially for the remainder of the season. We must all be good neighbors to keep the warming center open. I understand that a failure to follow this agreement will result in being asked to leave. Law enforcement may be notified to ensure that if I leave the property and neighborhood, your no return status will double in time if law enforcement is called. I understand the importance of being grateful. I agree for those who care for me. I agree to care for those who care for me. I will act in ways that protect the center and neighborhood. Guests of the warming center are to participate in making the shelter a safe and enjoyable experience for all. We are a community. We all contribute. We all help out. And then this occupancy agreement on the first night is also, the guests will come in and they will watch a YouTube video of you can't get that one. Okay, that one's not coming up. But they watch a YouTube video from our former operations manager where she goes through the entire occupancy agreement so they understand. So the video is a restatement of the occupancy agreement they just signed. We have guests watch the video. Like I said, the video clip is the beginning of the entire video. The very first thing this video covers is being a good neighbor and loitering. It is first because it is most important. We understand the problem. We actively employ every tool at our capacity to prevent our guests from coming into the neighborhood earlier, staying after our facility is closed, such as losing their bed for the night or longer. We have a clip of the low barrier. No?
Doesn't look like it's coming through the HDMI.
No? All right, that clip isn't coming up either. Guests that are found on the property before or afters will be approached by staff and asked to leave. That's a routine thing we do. It may be a warning. We may employ a night out for a first offense, but it may be a warning, then a night out. If it continues, we have a process. It would be 7 days, then it would be 30 based on our kind of our consequential process, and then it would be a season. So we take it very seriously. Once again, guests admitted to the center, they are not allowed to leave until the next morning to prevent them from going out into the community. They can't, if they leave, they can't return. So any guest that continues to struggle with this requirement will be put on no return status, like I just said, for either a week to start with, 30 days or season, or the entire season. Guests who harass neighbors or commit crimes on a neighboring property will receive a lifetime NRS. They can never return. And we currently have 34 people on a lifetime NRS status due to their inability to either abide by our rules within the center or their failure to be a good neighbor, or harassing or committing criminal activity on a neighbor's property. So standing or walking on public sidewalks is not a crime in and of itself, and FWC guests have the right to public ingress and egress to and from FWC. However, if a crime is committed, while doing so, the appropriate course of action is to first call law enforcement and secondarily contact FWC to see if we can assist. The only evidence the city has provided to support the minimizing claim is public comments to the city. The city has not cited these comments, nor has the city shared the evidentiary standard they applied in choosing to accept and act upon them. One individual who commented to this council said she called Tanya about an individual who was passed out on her property and complained that Tanya's only advice was to call the police. First, regarding this commenter, the individual is beyond the 150-foot radius, yet she knew who Tanya was and had her contact information to call. Second, a warming center staff member took her call and engaged in conversation. Third, based on the description of a medical emergency, the staff member appropriately recommended the caller contact law enforcement or 911, whatever first responder comes. For a medical emergency, it's the same number. We believe that was the appropriate response, was to recommend that they call 911. And we feel like we are responsive to this neighbor. It is clear that FWC, as a matter of policy and action, is very serious about reducing loitering in the community to the extent of our ability to do so. There's individuals that have not attended or been admitted to the warming center who we will continue to go out there and we will address and we will encourage them to not loiter, to move on when we have very little authority to do so and very little leverage, because they don't stay with us, so we don't hold any connection with them. But we continue to try to do that. We will, like I said, individuals we don't know if they're loitering, we've gone out to the neighbors' parking lot and spoke with them and encouraged them to move on several occasions, and we've done that out front of the warming center as well. So I think we take this policy very seriously, and we really want to be good neighbors, and loitering is very important, and we're all very consistent in addressing it. The city's assertions that FWC said loitering would not increase and that FWC minimizes the seriousness of loitering are both false. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Jane Emmert, and I'm addressing assertion number 7, which says, contrary to initial representations by the FWC, transportation of its patrons into and out of the neighborhood has not been provided. This assertion is supported by public comments to the council. In 2020, Flathead Warming Center said they would provide transportation. And in partnership with Eagle Transit, I can't read it, but there's part of the application, Mountain Climber, our public transportation would pick up and drop off at points that were organized, such as the library and Salvation Army, because that's where they got breakfast in the morning, using our public transportation company. And we did this because minimizing loitering in the area was important to us, and the fact that our guests walk many miles just to survive every day. And them accessing public transportation is a right they should have. In fact, providing transportation for the purpose of minimizing loitering is so important to us that we plan to adjust operating hours solely based on transportation availability. We encourage the use of the bus to actively discourage walking to the shelter and arriving early or staying late. We further disincentivize guests from arriving early or risk forfeiting their bed, as others have said. We've heard some of the council members remark during meetings that they've driven behind the bus and seen the clients or guests get on or off. The claim that we have not provided transportation is false. In 2023, at the direction of the county commissioners, the Mountain Climber changed their policies and started charging FWC for transportation of guests to and from the warming center. They changed their policy countywide. It was a post-COVID change, and so there was $1 a ride every time somebody wanted to go somewhere. But part of that problem was that it required a bank account, a debit card, a way to charge. You could no longer use cash. And for a population that's living paycheck to paycheck, cash is often the way that they live. So the Flathead Warming Center chose to add that to our expense, and we paid Mountain Climber $3,161 last year to transport guests in and out of the community. They have now withdrawn that option as well. But the city's assertion that transportation to our guests in and out of the neighborhood has not been provided is false. Thank you.
I would like to see if we could send you the slides so that you could see the different videos that we're able to show tonight. So we'll try to do that through public comment. Oh, I forgot someone.
Hello, Mayor Johnson and City Council. My name is Jeffrey Scoggin. I am a licensed mental health practitioner. I've lived in the Flathead Valley for 25 years. I've been practicing for 29 years, have over 44,000 hours of experience helping people with mental health issues. I will be addressing assertion number 5. Contrary to initial representations, Flathead Warming Center services communities beyond the Kalispell community. Please show us where, excuse me, let me get my old man glasses on here. Please show us where Tanya said Flathead Warming Center would not serve people from outside Kalispell. We cannot find any mention in the application process where Flathead Warming Center represented that only Kalispell inhabitants would benefit from this service. We never promised not to serve individuals from outside Kalispell, and furthermore, the city of Kalispell has no authority to restrict who we may or may not serve. We are funded 100% by community donations and not through city or county government. Although we are under no obligation to not serve people from outside the Flathead, we strive to focus our services to Flathead residents, those with legitimate reasons to be here. We get to know our guests. We query them where they are from, and here's an image of our actual guest registration form. We have garnered the following statistics from these actual guest registration forms that every Flathead Warming Center guest fills out. And following are the statistics garnered from that information. These statistics are not arbitrary. We have all the source documents to support these findings. 73% of 2024 overnight guests, or 237 out of 324 people, have lived in the Flathead for a year or more. An additional 19% of 2024 guests, or 62 people out of the 324, have a significant tie to this community as a natural support center, either through family or work. This leaves 8%, or 26 individuals, who do not have ties or a reason to be in our valley, only 4 of which stayed for over a month. The rest either left the area or acquired alternative arrangements. This is 92% of our guests last season have lived in the Flathead for a year or more, a standard for residency, or have a significant tie or reason to be in the Flathead. In other words, not transient, but having a significant reason to be in the Flathead. And recently, another social service agency made a press release that they have begun a new service where they try to return individuals from out of the area to their confirmed resources. Without press release, Flathead Warming Center has practiced this from day one. In the 23-24 winter season, Flathead Warming Center purchased transportation to return 6 individuals to their confirmed resources. Furthermore, Kalispell is the county seat, and people throughout the county come to Kalispell for resources. As recently as October 2023, this city council touted their approval of the Flathead Warming Center conditional use permit as a positive example of the city's proactive stance in recognizing the community need, as neighboring communities don't provide for these services. As written in the city's own application for HUD grant funding on October 16, 2023, the slide for the exhibit, Kalispell is the hub for needed valley-wide social services. According to Mayor Mark Johnson's 2020 homeless task force report, we further recognize that many of the county's homeless come into Kalispell to access services and resources, which adds to the city's burden on limited resources and services. This task force report was delivered to City Council within weeks of this council's approval of the Flathead Warming Center's CUP. As it is a known fact, Kalispell was the hub for resources in Flathead County long before the advent of the Flathead Warming Center. Would this council similarly expect other social service agencies to limit their services to Kalispell residents only? We should. Each season, we receive fewer than 10 individuals as referrals from Whitefish, whether they come off the train or by some other way. One individual brought in from the train reported fleeing a domestic violence situation. She bought a train ticket to take her as far as her money would allow, and that was to Whitefish. We worked with this individual to confirm where her natural resources were, and we purchased her a bus ticket back to her home shelter after confirming that they were expecting her and that she would have a bed. This was not an isolated situation. In an effort to coordinate a solution for the few individuals who are brought to the Flathead Warming Center from the train, Tanya initiated conversation via email with the Kalispell Police Chief, the Flathead County Sheriff, and the Whitefish Police Chief. Only the Whitefish Police Chief responded. He and Tanya had a meaningful conversation. We would like to be given a copy of the public records, including statements from the city of Whitefish, that are brought up in this assertion. We are unable to respond to that without seeing the specific records. Flathead Warming Center Board of Directors requested information similar to this in their letter dated 5/28/2024. In January 23, the Flathead County Commissioners penned a letter claiming in part that there is an organized network of individuals who come to the Flathead to take advantage of our resources. This has become an insidious disinformation. It is a lie. No one at the Flathead Warming Center has any knowledge of such a network. If such a thing did exist in our community, we would be among the first to cry foul. Flathead Warming Center has become aware of another lie being spread about the Flathead Warming Center. Okay. Yep. And then I will read the summary slide then. The city's assertion that Flathead Warming Center stated it would not serve anyone outside of Kalispell is false, nor is it right to have that expectation. Thank you.
We would like to reiterate that the concerns of our neighbors and City Council are important to us. The application for the CUP listed several plans for its opening and operation, and we would like to take the opportunity quickly to demonstrate our follow-through, even down to the smallest detail. We said we'd have a very blurry privacy fence, and we have a very blurry privacy fence. Improved conditions of adjoining lots. Looks better than it used to look before. This was the property before the warming center, and this is the property after the warming center. We said that we would have cameras installed inside and outside the center, and we do, even able to cover the neighbor's property as well. We said we would have trash service, and that we would pay for that, and we do. And we said, and this is an online, what our hours are. We said we don't intend to be 24 hours of operation, and we're not 24 hours of operation. All the way down to the smallest detail of a sandwich board. We said that we would have a sandwich board, and we have a sandwich board. Just a week prior to the approval of the FWC conditional use permit, the Mayor's Homeless Task Force presented the recommendation of their report to council, identifying gaps, recommendations number 15. A low barrier shelter is essential to give those who have no other option a place to stay that protects them from the elements and connects them to needed resources while avoiding unnecessary community confrontations. The door was open for collaboration in the very beginning of the warming center. The FWC Board of Directors and I have just spent time dissecting the 9 assertions against the Flathead Warming Center. The council has heard from a number of respected members of our community that the assertions are not true and why the assertions must be rejected by the council. The way we see it, the council has a choice: revocation or collaboration. That's revocation or collaboration. In the Flathead Warming Center's initial CUP process before the Planning Board on October 13, 2020, Council Graham cautioned us all. When there's a breakdown in communication because people aren't talking, that's when problems start. The FWC agrees with that statement. Problems start when communication breaks down. As community members provide public comments before council, we were caught off guard. Out of all public comments expressing concerns, I'm only familiar with 2 of those. And we had responded to the 2 concerns. Even in the 2, we had not heard the extent of what was being reported before the council. Most everyone who spoke before council, we had not heard from. We were not given the opportunity to listen and be responsive before things blew up at council level. We were caught off guard. The Flathead Warming Center immediately reached out to council for dialogue. It's confusing to me how we got this far in this process without dialogue, without being asked if what we were being accused of was true. Neighbors have been told that we're doing this wrong. We are now accused in the court of public opinion of not caring about our neighbors, our businesses. This is not true. We understand that when something happens on private property or business property, it feels very personal. We understand that. It is upsetting that the community now believes that all incidents in the area and sometimes across town are because of the warming center. This is unfair. If all incidents were attributable to our existence, it is further upsetting to me that we were not giving any information that we could use to identify the individuals so that we could hold the individuals accountable within our capacity. We want all neighbors to be heard. We've heard from neighbors that report that they too are confused by what they're hearing. Neighbors who've not seen any or experienced any of these issues in the neighborhood. One such neighbor reports walking daily and having never seen any of what's been reported at council level. We want all neighbors to be heard. We do care. We do care about all neighbors. In the absence of communication, we've not been given the opportunity to be responsive. It is true, when there's a breakdown in communication, because people aren't talking, that's when problems start. The absence of communication directly with the Flathead Warming Center continues to hurt our services, especially in the court of public opinion. In the homeless crisis in our community, the homeless community and the warming center have been painted as villains. All across social media, if you've seen it, it's pretty brutal, pretty brutal. The false narratives in our community do nothing but promote fear, anger, and in some cases, even hate. The current narrative about our service is false and hurtful to the homeless community members who are working hard to better their lives. Despite our efforts to share the facts of the warming center, false narratives continue to breed. Community members have extreme fixed opinions about our services and the people we serve. In these fixed opinions, our facts mean nothing. I implore the city council and the city to never be a part of engaging our community's false narratives, encouraging our community's false narratives. For those in our community who are willing to learn the truth, from those who know it, which is us, please allow us to set the record straight. The warming center is not a free-for-all. We have standards, we have strict rules, and most of our guests follow the rules because we show them care and concern for them, and we build community inside the shelter. Everyone participates and gives back to the shelter, mainly through chores, which we call community contributions. when we all feel like we're a part of something and we all have the opportunity to give back to it, we don't want to lose it. That's the same for warming center guests. That's called community and what we have inside the warming center. The same goes for warming center guests who follow our occupancy agreement to participate in our services. This is accountability inside the warming center that does not solely benefit the shelter or our guests, but our accountability also benefits our entire community. 2, we do not allow or tolerate any substance, including marijuana or drug paraphernalia on our property. Anyone who breaks the rules loses our services. The FWC staff do not hand out needles, despite what was shared in public comment. We provide sharps containers for immediate safe disposal of needles. In the past, a county program provided harm reduction services inside the warming center. I repeat, our staff has not nor will provide needles. Low barrier does not mean an individual is being enabled. It means we are better able to help someone in their addiction. And even those who struggle in their addiction must behave and follow our occupancy agreement. The warming center is a safe environment. When people have to sleep outside, that person is in crisis. People sleeping outside, now that's what's not safe for the individual or the community. When we have 50 people inside the warming center, those individuals are not out on the streets. We are not okay with serving individuals who do not have a reason to be here. We understand that our community does not have enough resources for our own neighbors. Our statistics are not arbitrary. Our statistics are not made up. John has 3 large notebooks back there that are our occupancy agreements. We go through those for our registrations where we ask all of those questions. That's how we have our statistics. We don't make it up. It is not a cover-up. We have the statistics. We have documentation to back up the statistics in the Flathead Warming Center. No one that we have served has been a part of an organized network. And when an individual is best served somewhere else, primarily because this isn't their community, we have purchased tickets out of our community back to the individual's confirmed resources. And we've always done this. We provide tickets out of town, but we are not dumping anyone into an unknown community. Nor do we have evidence that anyone who comes to our services have been strategically dumped on us. The concept of individuals being shipped here, well, in my house, we call that the big lie that keeps going and going and just keeps going and going. Perhaps there have been situations in our community that people have blown out of proportion to fuel the narrative. Please hear me. We have no evidence that the Flathead Warming Center serves individuals who have been dumped, shipped, or transported in groups to the Flathead. This is false narrative about our services, and this false narrative only exists to fuel fear, anger, and in some cases, hate. It is much harder to see those who are in crisis in our community as our neighbors. And overall, as a community, we're not doing a very good job taking care of our neighbors. Providing services and resources is not enabling, nor do we grow homelessness. It is only through a hand up that individuals can get out of homelessness. It will take more services, not less, to make a dent in the homelessness in our community. The idea that if we just stop providing services and resources to individuals, that they will just leave the Flathead is completely incorrect and pretty inhumane. The fewer resources that we have, the more pronounced the crisis and the fight for survival will be within our community. Not providing services has the opposite outcome than what the community has been told. Our community has been told that these people are not from here, and if you don't serve them, they'll just go away. This is simply not true. Less services mean more crises is played out on the streets, in front of businesses, and in yards. For example, locking public bathrooms, regardless of the justification to do so, will result in the fight for survival, more individuals relieving themselves in public. The Flathead Warming Center provides much more than just a bed. We bring our community's providers of services and resources inside the shelter. Every 7 nights, our guests engage in a personalized roadmap, assessment, and process to move beyond homelessness. We are much more than just a bed. The homeless community is often grouped together and painted as villains in our community. What our community needs is real accountability for the bad actors who are often just moved along throughout town because oftentimes law enforcement does not have the tools that they need to do something else other than to move the individuals along. We need to give our law enforcement the tools that they need to do the work. The Flathead Warming Center does not and cannot serve all the homeless community. There are individuals within our community who would not be accountable to our rules for a safe shelter, and these are the individuals most often causing destruction throughout our entire community. We've held these individuals accountable. These destructive individuals need to be held accountable beyond our capacity. The Flathead Warming Center does not have any desire to be like the large cities. I think the fear of what's happening in large cities drives a lot of the false community narratives that we have. The FWC is not attracting people to the Flathead for our services. This is a false narrative, only serves to promote fear in our community. Facts about our services. We are not open for overnights. We are only open for overnight services in the winter. We are not open 24 hours a day. You come in the morning, you come in the evening, you leave in the morning. We are a remodeled garage with plastic mats on bunk beds in a large bunk room with everyone else. I assure you, despite what the current narrative in our community is, no one is moving to the Flathead to be homeless in the winter to sleep inside the warming center. This false information really lacks logic on several fronts. We are not funded through tax dollars. We are funded through donations from our community that believes in the services we provide. We are funded by generous donors that see the value in taking care of those who are hurting among us. The Flathead Warming Center has always been grateful for our community support, and especially throughout all the false narratives. We are grateful that our supporters can see through the fear and anger beyond the false narratives to see the good that we are doing in our community. Revocation or collaboration. Revocation would not solve the issues in our community, but rather would make it worse. Revocation would mean 50 more homeless individuals would be on the street. I call for collaboration. At first, I considered listing all the different ways that the FWC has come to the table time and time again for collaboration. However, I won't be doing so at this time. I am not a stranger to the council. I think the council is aware of all the times myself and the Flathead Warming Center board have reached out for collaboration. Action and collaboration is what we seek from the council and the city. Collaboration is happening in almost every city in Montana between service providers and their municipalities. There is collaborative work that can and should be happening beyond the approval and pending revocation of a CUP. This is not a new topic between us. It is false information that the council should not get involved in collaborative initiatives of the social service community. Again, collaboration is happening with municipalities across the state, and our community is missing out on all that we could do and should accomplish together. Our community's homeless collaborative housing solutions of Northwest Montana has actively asked for collaboration and even cooperation with our city on more than one occasion. I have copies of the letters asking for collaboration. It is clear to me that the lack of collaboration, the work of co-laboring together between the city and social service providers is pretty counterproductive to what all neighbors and business owners seek. Where there is issues in our community of extreme behaviors, doesn't it make sense that we work together for a stronger and safer community? The impacts of the homelessness is a problem in all of Kalispell. Can we collaborate to make a better community for everyone in Kalispell? What if? What if? What if Kalispell had a community resource officer whose time is dedicated to engaging with homeless community and our homeless service providers? Such a dedicated officer could close the gaps in communication between the city, service providers, and the overall community. Such a dedicated resource officer could more productively address community's concerns. This kind of community policing is based on relationships. And homeless service providers can attest that relationships work best in working with the homeless community. A community homeless resource officer would make great strides in our community. There is so much that we could be doing together in collaboration. Please find new ways to come to the table with your local service community and nonprofits to collaborate in finding solutions that are best for our entire community. Your constituents are asking for you to be a part of solutions in our community. Please do not allow this current process or the current relationship between the city and the Flathead Warming Center to be a hindrance in working in collaboration with all our nonprofits in the valley. I encourage the city and council to do big things for our community, and this includes collaboration. As a community, together, we need to focus less on where people should not be, and focus a lot more on solution as to where homeless community can be to get the help that they need. I want to read that again. As a community together, we need to focus less on where people should not be, and focus a lot more on solutions as to where the homeless community can be to get the help they need. The Flathead Warming Center is still at the table, and we still want to work with you. I ask the council to now hear remarks from one of our legal team.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Honorable Council. My name is Michelle Weinberg, and I am an attorney for the Flathead Warming Center. I just want to make sure I have this correct. This council has approved not one, but two conditional use permits for the Flathead Warming Center. One, the first one in November of 2020, and the second in September of 2022. Now, the council, after my client met the terms and conditions of approval for those conditional use permits, that they obtain a vested right in those approvals and a protected property right under the U.S. and Montana Constitution. Now, the council is proposing to revoke a lawfully issued CUP, but it has absolutely, I'm sorry to say, you have absolutely no legal basis to do so. I don't understand, I'm frankly befuddled as to how we are here tonight. First, under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution and Article 2, Section 29 of the Montana Constitution, my client has a private property right, and you cannot take it for public use without just compensation. If the Flathead Warming Center's protected property right has a claim of entitlement to retain its CUP permit approval because the city lacks all discretion to revoke the permit or withhold its continued approval. There's case law in Montana and a lot of case law in the federal courts that support that legal assertion. The center has been in operation since 2020 as a legal conditional use. It has obtained all the required permits as it was required to by you all and by state law, so on and so forth. And as Mr. McGarvey alluded to earlier tonight, they performed substantial work in obtaining and improving its facility, totaling well over $800,000 in good faith reliance on the permits issued by this council. As such, the warming center has a fundamental vested right in its continued operation, which would cease and entitle the warming center to compensation if you all were to revoke its permit. You cannot do so. It would also be an inverse condemnation of the center's property and its business. Also under the Fifth Amendment and Article 2, Section 17 of the Montana Constitution, the revoking the center's permit would also be a violation of the center's substantive and procedural due process rights. The Constitution, Montana Constitution states that no person shall be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And substantive due process prohibits the state from taking unreasonable, arbitrary, or capricious action, which of course this would be. You have no legitimate reason to revoke the permit. The center has gone to great lengths to refute the false claims that have been leveled at it, that have damaged its reputation. And again, I'm just at a loss as to why we have gotten this far in this process. It would be if you all were to pursue revoking this permit, that decision would be subject to nullification as a violation of the center's federal and state right to substantive due process, because such an action would be clearly arbitrary and unreasonable. You've not provided my client with any real evidence of what you're accusing the center of doing, and moreover, under state law, there is no process by which to revoke the conditional use permit. They've met all their terms and conditions, period. Years ago, period. It would also violate, revoking the permit would also violate the center's procedural due process rights, given the unfair process associated with this action. Because due process requires a fair and impartial tribunal and a fair hearing. How can this be a fair hearing when the center does not know the specifics of the accusations being lodged against it? It isn't. It's not a fair process. The charges the city has leveled against the center are vague. They're overly broad. They're undefined, such as my client has explained tonight. They've had difficulty in responding to them. The allegations are based on unsworn comments, and those commenters have not undergone cross-examination to determine the veracity of the truth of the matter. So merely because the city has set this hearing and provided a vague list of supposed concerns, it does not provide our client with a meaningful hearing under the due process clause of the Montana Constitution and the United States Constitution. And third, I just want to address, and I allude to it a bit in the written comments that I provided to you on July 12th. Hopefully you all seen those and read those. Thank you. This idea of expanding the neighborhood to a half-mile radius. When you all considered the initial conditional use permit in November of 2020, the staff report considered the impacts to the neighborhood, and it described the neighborhood as located on one of the main corridors within the city along North Meridian Road. And it went on to describe that there was a mix of uses in the neighborhood and what the current use of the property was. If it was an auto repair shop or something like that. And it did not at all talk about the residential neighborhoods that were further out, let alone the hospital, let alone the junior high school, and all these areas that you are all considering to be the neighborhood associated with the warming center. The staff report also stated that there would be no significant impacts on property values expected as a result of the requested conditional use permit. In approving the conditional use permit, you adopted those findings of fact. Those are the findings of fact. You can't change your definition of what a neighborhood is associated with the warming center 3 years later. It's preposterous. It really is. So, I mean, I don't think I'll add too much more to my comments tonight. Again, I've submitted pretty detailed written comments. I would just encourage you all to uphold your oath of office and protect the United States and Montana Constitution in your duties. You do not have the power to revoke the conditional use permit, and I would encourage you not to do so. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alan Lerner, and I'm an attorney at law. I've lived in Montana for 50 years. I've lived in the Flathead Valley since 1980. I live in Hillcrest, which is part of the county, but not part of the city, although my address is Kalispell. I'm one of the signatories on the public comment that came through to the city council. I don't have much to add. Alan McGarvey, Michelle, and Nick have said about everything I could say about the legal subject. I do want to say that in this situation, litigation is in no one's interest. And I think the city, in its pursuit of the police powers it's been granted, should take the warming center as a free gift in helping to support those police powers, because that is exactly what it is. So thank you very much for listening, and please have a pleasant night.
So, any questions from council of any of the response items?
Just that, are they going to be emailed to our public comments so we can view them at home?
I'll email it tonight.
That'd be great, thank you.
Sorry I didn't do it ahead of time.
Any questions? Okay. What's that?
Might have questions tomorrow after I go
Exactly.
through all this.
No,
So I've been typing feverishly.
So we will meet again tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. It wasn't 6, it's 7 o'clock tomorrow night, and pick this up and move forward in some direction at the council level at that point. So appreciate the time, the comments, most of the civility we've had tonight. And with that, I'm going to go to city manager for any reports from you tonight.
Yeah, just briefly, obviously, meeting tomorrow night at 7, and just touch on next week work session was kind of an extension of our budget discussions as it related to a potential Trails Assessment District that was requested. Be able to have that discussion prior to final budget adoption, and really to discuss if council is interested in going out for a potential vote related to that. And so kind of follow a lot from the same materials. We're just trying to update some of the numbers from the previous work sessions we've had on that. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything from council tonight? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll obviously discuss this topic more tomorrow, but I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Warming Center, all the folks that spoke this evening. Excellent presentation, very thorough. I was very impressed. I did want to speak to, over the weekend, there was an attempted assassination of former President Trump. And I state the obvious, I think, in this room, but political violence has no place in our democracy. And we should all strive and commit ourselves to resolving political differences through our democratic process and through civil dialogue. And it's a horrific thing we saw this weekend, and hopefully it doesn't result in any further violence. And my heart goes out to the individual who was killed in that event.
Well said, Mr. Hunter.
Here, here.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I would also like to thank the Warming Center for the time that they put in to answer the concerns that were leveled at the last meeting and that we had, what was it, a month ago, probably, a little over a month ago. You were very thorough in how you looked at everything and how you responded. I do still see some concerns, but I mean, I'll be talking about them tomorrow. But I do want to thank you for taking it seriously and putting as much detail into it that you did. I started this. I was the first person to say I support the Warming Center. I think you do good work. I want it to be very clear that I feel like I'm doing my job as a council member and addressing concerns that my constituents have. And there are things that the city council has as it pertains to conditional use permits that we need to look at. So that's where this process started at. It snowballed to where we are now for certain reasons and everything. And communication. I am serious about communication about that. And, you know, when I said that comment at the meeting, that communication was between the Warming Center and the neighborhood. It's the same thing that I would go through and say if we have a development. It's the developer with the neighborhood. Communication. And when you don't have that communication, you get into bad spots. So I want to thank you for answering the questions and concerns. And I imagine we'll probably see you tomorrow.
Anything else from council? Mr. Dowd?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to also thank the Warming Center for its presentation tonight. I really appreciated the work that went into it and the efforts that you went to address our questions. I also want to fully, let everyone know that we see a concerted defense of the Warming Center here tonight, present at our meeting. But there is another portion of there's the other side of this coin that's not here tonight, right? There are definitely neighbors, whether they're in the neighborhood or if they're close to the Warming Center, that have brought forth some valid concerns. And whether they're factual, statistical, or just a feeling, we do have a lot of people that have reached out to us in probably proportional or maybe even more on the other side that have concerns. So I want to make sure that we're taking them into account as well. And we will talk about that tomorrow, obviously, but I don't want anything to be skewed by the representation tonight because I think that you all made a very, very good defense for the Warming Center tonight, and you came out en masse and showed your support. It's great. I just don't want everybody to think that this is the only side of the story, right? So we're going to take all of that into consideration when we are deliberating over the evening. And, thanks for making the last 2 months probably the most stressful of my entire time on council. But with that, I'll get back to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. Anything else from council? Mr. Hunter, you touched on it. And whenever I come to a public meeting and the room is full, emotions get high, things get said. And unfortunately, sometimes those things that get said go a little bit far. I've grown thick skin. I know all my council members, we've grown thick skin, and it doesn't bother us. But we also have to understand that when you get up and you give your presentation and you give your comments, and the other side gets up and gives their comments, appreciation and understanding for their position, not a shaking of the head, not a making faces, but understanding that those comments from both sides come from somebody's personal experience. Whether you disagree with it or not, it's up to us to listen to it. And as a council, we have to weigh all of that. So in a way, we sit here kind of like the parent. We got one side, we got another side. And how do we weigh this? But as elected officials, when we start picking up on that language and we start using it against one another or against the public, it can lead to things like we saw on Saturday. I've personally lived through 2 assassination attempts on presidents. I really hope I don't live through an assassination attempt on the mayor of Kalispell. Because I will honestly say, there are times with comments, with emails, you think I don't feel like I need an armed guard at times? Try me in COVID. Try having a gentleman walk in because he's going to arrest me with personal, what was it, personal arrest powers, Mr. Russell? Citizen's arrest and make threats against my family. So let's put this in perspective, and I understand we have a lot in this community that we're trying to deal with. A lot of it are not things of our own making. There are a lot of decisions made at different levels of government that make our job tougher. This is just where the rubber hits the road. So please, as we deliberate on this tomorrow night, and we have those comments, and I would expect at some point in time, as we're having a conversation, Ms. Horn, if you could be here to respond, if we have any specific questions for you and your staff, I would appreciate, I mean, assuming you're going to be here. But as we have, okay, some of those questions, but as we get public comment, because I'm going to open the meeting for public comment one more time tomorrow before we deliberate. Let's let people have free flow of comments, of information, and respect the position that different people have in our community. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting. We're adjourned.